This is our MC, Jin Seowon, a 2-3-year-old lazy-ass gamer and manhwa freak, pretty much a certified nerd with zero ambition outside of virtual worlds. If there's a game to grind or a Muram novel to binge, he's all in. Real life doesn't stand a chance against his obsession. When he's gaming, he's an entirely different beast. Earlier, he'd been deep into a Muram novel when a plot twist hit him like a truck. A few months back, he wrapped up his military service, though it didn't exactly end on a high note. It was more of a train wreck, honestly. His one and only friend eventually called, practically begging him to hit up some games. Seowon didn't even think twice before saying yes. Gaming was always the obvious choice. Responsibility could wait. With just a few bucks to his name, he dragged his broke ass to the gaming station, half-heartedly considering the idea of a part-time job. He figured that was future Seowon's problem. Right now, he was all set to dive into loyal grounds for the next 10 hours. Seowon wasn't just any gamer. He was the type who spent hours lost in fantasies of being the ultimate Muram protagonist, while grinding his way to the top in loyal grounds. After 3 relentless months, he cracked the top 10, flexing his ultra-pro skills and making some decent cash from tournaments along the way. Grinding had definitely paid off. Now, let's take a quick look at the game. It kicks off with 100 players getting tossed out of a plane straight into the chaos below. Their job is find weapons as fast as humanly possible and take out anyone in their path until one final badass claims that winner winner chicken dinner. Sounds familiar, right? Thanks to our boy's quick reflexes and eagle-eyed vision, he spotted his opponent from 250 meters away, rocking a skull helmet, like he was about to start a biker gang. Without a second thought, Seowon started tearing through the lobby, dropping players left and right like it was just another Tuesday. 2 more kills later, it was down to 3 players, including himself and 2 unlucky souls. That's when his friend, who'd already been knocked out, started running his mouth over the mic, throwing out so-called pro tips like he was some gaming guru. Seowon couldn't care less and just told him to zip it. The last remaining duo decided to make a break for a random ruined house, probably thinking they'd struck gold when they found a first aid kit inside. Rookie mistake. Nothing's ever free in this world except advice, which usually sucks. Seowon knew they'd fallen for the bait, so he took the next step, opened fire. The first guy, still gloating over his free loot, dropped like a sack of potatoes. His teammate, realizing it was a trap, tried to make a run for it, but Jin's bullet found him before he got out the door. And just like that, Seowon snagged the first place of the game. After sinking countless hours into the game, Seowon finally decided to wrap it up. Maybe it was time to hit pause on gaming and actually study starting tomorrow, of course. But as the saying goes, there is no tomorrow. And for Seowon, that couldn't be more accurate. Just as he was about to log out, his phone buzzed, yanking his attention away from the screen. A message from his mom. Typical. As always, she'd sent over his academy fees, along with some extra cash for his well-being, reminding him to take care of himself. She even promised to send more next time. Typical mom stuff, always looking out for him, no matter how much of a mess he made of his life. Seowon let out a long sigh as he stepped out of the gaming station. Every time he saw a message from his mom, a familiar pang of guilt hit him. She kept supporting him like he was still that hard-working kid she once knew. Meanwhile, here he was wasting away in gaming stations and dodging responsibilities like a pro. It wasn't like he didn't want to do better. It was just easier not to. Night had settled in, but Seowon, the certified insomniac, was still glued to his phone. But instead of the usual high-quality stuff everyone watches at 2 a.m., he was watching some news clip about a bunch of weirdos calling themselves players. Curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to dig deeper. But just as he tried to find more, the page straight up vanished. Even the video he'd watched a millisecond ago had mysteriously poofed into thin air, like it never existed. Seowon frowned, wondering if his sleep-deprived brain was playing tricks on him. After a moment of contemplation, he just shrugged it off. Whatever. Not like he had the energy to bother. He tossed his phone aside, muttering about how weird it was, and tried to get some sleep. The next day, Seowon made his way to the academy, still glued to his phone screen like always. He barely looked up, too caught up in the upcoming clan war in-game. But then, out of nowhere, a sudden flash of light practically slapped him in the face. Before his brain could even process what the hell was happening, the light completely swallowed him up. 1 second, he was standing there like a zombie. The next, he was gone, just like that. Yep, Light-kun straight up kidnapped him. When Seowon woke up, he found himself sprawled out on a random field, and the scene in front of him was pure chaos. 2 guys were going at each other with swords, swinging like they had a personal vendetta. The language they were shouting at each other was complete gibberish, totally foreign. Seowon couldn't make out a single word. He glanced around and spotted some other guys nearby, and his first thought was that they looked like full-on cosplayers. One dude in particular had this flashy mage getup and was pulling off some legit magic moves. Seowon was absolutely freaked out, still trying to process whether this was some kind of elaborate dream or if he'd just hit his head a bit too hard. As he scanned the area, his gaze landed on a massive statue right in front of him. Suddenly, a voice echoed in his head, cold and robotic, telling the language synchronization process is initiated. The words felt like they were sinking straight into his brain, and the next thing he knew, he could actually understand the shouting around him. Apparently, the 2 swordsmen had been fighting over some sect drama classic ego clash. Meanwhile, the mage Blondie, pissed off and looking ready to set someone on fire was going off about being betrayed. Turns out, his opponent had tricked him multiple times before, and the guy honestly looked like a budget version of the Joker from The Dark Knight. The mage clearly wasn't in the mood for another heart-to-heart with his ex-bestie, so he whipped out one of his flashy attack spells. Only, when it hit, it didn't even leave a scratch. Seo-woon couldn't help but snicker a bit, realizing he was basically watching two idiots bicker in the middle of a battlefield. A sudden system notification blared, signaling the start of the game. The difficulty level was set to easy, at least on paper. To clear the stage, players just needed to make it into the top 90. Simple enough, right? Except there was no tutorial. The system wasn't about to hold anyone's hand. The map of the kingdom popped up, accompanied by an explanation from the knight statue, a familiar figure from the panels. The game was set to span 100 years in in-game time. Each day, the playable area on the map would shrink just a little, forcing players closer together. Trying to leave the designated zone wasn't an option. The consequences would be anything but pleasant. The game wouldn't end until only one player remained. Whoever managed to survive to the end and eliminate the final opponent would be returned to their original world. However, anyone who failed to make it into the top 90 would lose their chance to participate in Cloyd survival ever again. Alright, enough with the explanation. Let's cut to Seo-woon, who's currently dealing with the massive headache of realizing he might actually be in loyal grounds right now. Surrounded by barbaric brutes and shady-looking types, one thing's pretty damn clear: he's officially ducked hard to death. Just as he's spiraling into that lovely realization, a booming voice snaps him out of it. The source? An XL-sized gorilla of a guy, built like a brick wall with about a millimeter of brain power. To top it off, his ego is as fragile as a cheap vase. The dude looks ready to snap just because Seo-woon didn't immediately acknowledge his existence. Predictably, Gorilla Guy tries to take a swing, but the system's got other plans. Attack restrictions kick in, and the countdown starts. Seo-woon can't help but chuckle at the situation. Right before he's teleported out, he flashes the big guy a not-so-polite farewell gesture. 10 years of gaming experience have taught him one thing: always piss off the meatheads before making a clean escape. Day 1 of the Cloyd survival kicked off just as planned. Plane-kun did its thing, shoving players out one by one. The usual chaos unfolded, and among the crowd, 3 guys were already trailing behind a woman for, let's just say, 2 big obvious reasons. But Seo-woon wasn't about to join that sad parade. Unlike the others, he knew the hot drop areas had better loot, but he wasn't keen on diving straight into a death trap. Instead, he planned to start from the outskirts, less competition, more chances to gear up. After what felt like a century of looking for a decent landing spot, he finally picked one. The landing itself looked pretty badass, but there was just one problem: motion sickness. Seo-woon's stomach twisted, and he knew throwing up was a real possibility. Still, his priority was to find cover. As soon as his feet hit the ground, he bolted for the nearest house. That's when he heard it, a faint rustling sound. His heart raced, and he practically leapt inside, slamming the door behind him. First things first, weapon. He locked the door, exhaled sharply, and leaned against it. Reality hit him like a truck when he remembered the big and fragile guy he'd pissed off earlier. A pang of regret washed over him. Maybe provoking that dude wasn't the brightest move. He glanced out the window, expecting trouble, but after a moment, he realized the whole panic episode had been triggered by the rattling of the wind. Great. All that huffing and puffing for nothing. Shaking off the embarrassment, Seo-woon decided to start scavenging. Luck was on his side, a heavy crossbow tucked away in the corner. Not exactly his weapon of choice, but it was better than being defenseless. He hefted it, grimacing at the weight. Definitely heavier than expected, but no way was he ditching it. Testing it out seemed like the next logical step. The steps to load the bow and handle the crossbow flowed into Seo-woon's mind like second nature. Years of military training had drilled the basics into him, so aiming and shooting felt almost instinctual. With practiced ease, he pulled the trigger, and the arrow shot out with devastating speed. The recoil, though, was no joke. It launched him back several meters, completely catching him off guard. He hadn't expected the weapon to pack that much power. Still rubbing his shoulder from the impact, Seo-woon couldn't help but think that mastering this crossbow would be worth the effort. Once he got the hang of it, this thing could turn out to be seriously useful. With that thought settled, he decided to check out the area. The map was huge, a definite advantage, but he wasn't about to risk running into an enemy before snagging some decent loot. He slipped inside one of the nearby houses, scanning for anything useful. That's when his eyes landed on a strange scroll, faintly glowing on a dusty table. Curious, he picked it up, and a system message popped up. Healing scroll. Apparently, to acquire the skill, he'd have to rip it open. Not bad. A little healing on the side could definitely come in handy. And to top it all off, Seo-woon's gaze landed on a particular glowing book on the shelf. Something about it just screamed, "Pick me." As he got closer, he realized it contained a high-level martial art technique, Black Star Chi Palms. Apparently, mastering it would make weapon handling a breeze. Intrigued, Seo-woon couldn't help but wonder if a tutorial would kick in if he tried to learn it. Before he could even think of opening it, the book suddenly started glowing even brighter, its pages flipping on their own like it was possessed. Seo-woon just stood there, eyes wide, watching the spectacle. A few minutes later, the book started tearing itself apart, pages shredding into nothing. He couldn't help but blurt out, "What the fuck just happened?" Suddenly, he felt something strange in his palm, like a surge of power. Curiosity got the best of him. He grabbed a spoon from nearby and threw it with every bit of strength he could muster. The spoon shot forward like a bullet, smashing straight into the wall and leaving a noticeable crack. Siawoon just stood there, dumbfounded. Realization hit him like a truck. He had actually learned martial arts. While yanking the fork out of the wall, he's thinking there's gotta be magic books too. I mean, if there are martial arts books, why not magic ones? Either way, he's dead sure this game, Cloyd, Survival, and Loyal Ground are basically the same beast. He searches every damn corner for the item, but when nothing turns up, he figures it's time to bounce. Day flips to night while he's still on the hunt for a new spot. Finally, he spots a house with a light still on. Instant red flag. Could be a rare hidden item or another player. Either way, he gets that gut twist of fear. Slowly, he creeps inside, trying not to make a single sound. Dude still has no clue if whoever's inside is cracked at the game or just some noob. Hunkered by the stairs, he strains his ears. Nothing makes him think the player's camping upstairs, so he starts plotting an ambush, loading up his weapon and prepping those black star chi palms. Even if they're good, he might just stand a chance. Step by step, he creeps up with his crossbow aimed dead ahead, only to find just a damn lantern. No players. Could still be a trap though, so he boots a nearby door open like a badass empty. That's when it hits him. He's been spooking himself for nothing. Drops to the floor feeling dumb as hell, but also a little relieved nobody's here. While scavenging, jackpot, he finds a glowing ring that boosts strength by +20. He slips it on, and bam, body feels like it just got a full upgrade. Crossbow's light as a toy now. If strength can go up, there's gotta be other stats too. He pops open the stat window and, damn, his numbers are trash. Notices he's got the martial arts class, probably from that book earlier. Still, it's way better than when he first dropped in. He keeps searching and scores big again, a subspace ring. Perfect. Lets him stash gear in a pocket dimension. Touch the ring. Think subspace. And boom, stuff stored. Touch it again while thinking of the item, and it pops out. Feels weird at first, but hey, no more lugging a bag around. He dumps all his loot into it, then checks the survivor count, still 99 players left. He wanted to grind till it hit 90, but with his current loadout, he's feeling good. Even though it makes sense to wait till morning, he decides to prowl at night. Less foot traffic, more loot. Just one more farming spot before sunrise. Moving through the forest, he notices he's not tired, but hunger and thirst still hit. Makes him wonder if there's food in the city. Map says it should be just outside the forest, but no houses in sight. Then low, nasty growl behind him. Doesn't even turn around, just bolts. Finds a place to duck into and peeks back. Holy hell, a freaking werewolf. It swipes at him, claws whistling past as he dodges and sprints. Turns out, this game's got more than just sweaty players. There are monsters too. Heart pounding, he dives into the nearest house, trying to think fast. The werewolves track him by scent, so he knows hiding won't last. Time to flip the script. He lines up his shot and drops one with a clean headshot dead on impact. The second one roars and charges, smashing the door and nicking his face. Nowhere left to run. He fires again, but this one's quicker, blocking with its claws before lunging at him. The thing's practically in his face. He's thinking this might be it. Then instinct kicks in. He rips a dagger from his subspace and hurls it with a martial arts technique. The strike punches a damn hole through the werewolf. Even with the beast down, his hands are still shaking. One wrong move, and he'd have been dog food. He slumps to the ground, grateful as hell that he stashed that dagger, otherwise he'd have been toast to some random monster in the game. A glowing bag on the ground yanks Siawoon out of his thoughts, and he figures it's probably loot dropped from some monster. Turns out it's just water and jerky, but that's enough to make him realize hell yeah, he can straight up hunt monsters for food. He munches while scouting the house for more goodies, and stumbles across some armor that looks like a bootleg bulletproof vest. The second he puts it on, it auto-sizes to fit him and boosts his resistance against fire and wind magic. His whole build just got way more cracked, so he keeps digging for loot. Right when he's about to call it quits, he kicks a random cloth bundle underfoot. Hidden inside is a night cloak that turns him invisible in the dark, as long as he doesn't move. Perfect for creeping around at night without getting spotted. At first, this house felt sus, but damn, it's actually a decent farming spot. Stepping outside, he realizes he hasn't run into a single player yet. Maybe it's because of where he landed, but then, just like fate, he hears heavy footsteps. Some poor bastard stumbles out, bleeding and muttering about not having time to use an item. Siawoon stays tucked in the trees, shadowing his every step. He debates killing the guy, but his hands won't stop shaking. He's never actually killed a player before. Before he can decide, a mage pops out of nowhere and blasts the dude with a flame spell, roasting him alive. Siawoon just stares, watching someone get burned to ash right in front of him, leaves him speechless. All that's left is a chest of loot. He tries to remind himself it's just a damn game, but it still messes with his head. The mage casually walks past him, muttering about how the guy tried to steal his items, completely ignoring Siawoon's presence. While the mage scoops up everything, Siawoon realizes the dead guy was just like him, a player trying to survive, and if he hesitates now, he'll be the next one roasted. He fires an arrow at the mage, but it bounces off a glowing shield. His stomach twists. The sound might drag other players here. He curses the mage for being so damn loud, then looses another arrow, chipping the shield even more. The mage panics. He knows if the shield breaks, he's screwed. He flings random flame spells, trying to scare Siawoon off, but they don't do shit. Another arrow rips through, shattering the barrier. The mage starts fumbling to cast again, but before he can finish, a dagger slams straight into his skull. Instant kill. Siawoon finally steps out of hiding, heart pounding, realizing he just won. He knows he can't stick around. The fire already lit up a beacon for anyone nearby. He strips both bodies, finding a gold necklace and a strange circular stone. The stone lets players use magic, and he remembers the dying guy whining about not having time to use his item. Smirking, he says he'll make good use of it in his name. Since it's way too risky to test loot here, he finds a hiding spot. When he finally activates the stone, the system warns him he can't move for 3 damn hours. He stays locked in place the whole time, gritting through the pain. But when it's over, the payoff is insane. He now has mage class stacked right next to his martial arts class, which means magic plus martial arts. Straight busted. Thinking about the 2 who died yesterday, he checks the survivor list. His jaw drops. The count has dropped by half. Only 45 players left. Word is, some psycho named Nam Sagwang is shredding everyone. Dude's literally smurfing in ancient Fortnite. The scene flips back to 3 hours earlier, where Sagwang is out there being a total bully, tormenting another player. The poor bastard begs for his life, saying he just wants to make it to the top 10, but Sagwang isn't the type to hand out charity kills. He just farms aura, ignores all the loot, and low-key wonders if the whole lobby already knows his name by now. Cut to day 3 of the survival game. Siawoon wakes up and sees the survivor count drop to 45. The scoreboard is basically Sagwang spammed all over, so our boy knows exactly who to avoid. Still, he realizes that if people keep dropping like flies, he might actually crawl his way into the top 10. Before the game began, the system promised that top 10 rankers would get some kind of reward, and now he can't help but wonder what that prize is. While he's deep in thought, he suddenly remembers there's a killer running loose, so he better wrap up his search and move. Thanks to using the magic circle earlier, he feels this power inside him, pretty sure it's mana. To test it, he whips out the magic book he grabbed yesterday, and instantly downloads a spell straight into his head. He chants, and 4 glowing magic balls float in the air. At first, it feels weak as hell, so he just yeets them away. But the moment they smash into the wall, boom, massive explosion, wall obliterated. Turns out this spell slaps after all. Then reality hits, his body crashes hard, drained because his mana's gone. Meanwhile, the map keeps shrinking, and he's sticking to the edges to dodge fights. Half the lobby's already toast anyway, so the odds of bumping into someone are slim. Still, he knows he needs to grind quick before the circle screws him over. As he moves to his next spot, an old man perched on a tree watches him like a hawk, finding his moves entertaining. Hours later, Siawoon reaches a farming area and spots a pile of looted chests. Immediately sus, he whips around and blasts the entrance with his windball spell. The explosion wrecks the doorway, but no one's there. Just as he chills, he notices blood smeared on the wall inside. That screams injured player, and if they've lived this long, they're definitely strong. He decides not to risk it and bails. Good call, because inside is an injured survivor, watching him leave. The guy thinks he could have killed Siawoon if he wasn't busted up, but before he can even loot a chest, an arrow drills through his skull, turning him into loot himself. Siawoon just pulled a slick bait and kill. As he preps to leave, the old man suddenly appears behind him and says he looks pretty skilled. Siawoon nearly shits himself, but the old dude calms him down, saying he just wants to ask some questions. Still rattled, Siawoon asks who the hell he is, but instead of answering, the old man flips it, saying even if he told him, it wouldn't matter since they're all from different lives. His tone is weirdly soothing, making Siawoon feel like this guy is built different from the other psychos in the game. The old man asks if Siawoon has played this game before, revealing he's been stalking him for a while and noticed how quickly he adapted. Siawoon's shocked he never noticed the tale and says it's his first run here, though he's played a game similar to this in his own world. The old man is curious, but with night closing in, they need to move somewhere safe. He asks Siawoon if the moon in his world is as massive as this one. Siawoon looks up and realizes he never noticed before the moon here is huge, way bigger than the one back home. The old man confirms it's the same for him too. He drags the convo back to the game, asking Siawoon to explain more. Our boy says standing around is just asking for an ambush. The old man agrees and suggests they head out. Still, Siawoon is nervous about being stabbed in the back, so he asks for some reassurance. The old guy tells him he already knows he won't kill him, then suddenly grabs him and blitzes across the forest at insane speed, stopping high up on a tree. From there, Siawoon starts explaining everything about his own game world. The old man listens, intrigued, saying his world sounds magical. Siawoon, struggling to keep his balance, corrects him it's a world of super advanced civilization. The old man says that must be why he adapts so damn fast here. He also reveals he's been watching since Siawoon first dropped. His plan was just to vibe in the mountains the whole game, but Siawoon's playstyle caught his attention. Finally, The old man assures him he only started this conversation out of curiosity to figure out why they were dragged here and swears he means no harm. Seo-woon admitted he had no damn clue why they were dragged into this nightmare. Back in his world, the game was just for fun. No one actually died, but here, it was a whole different beast. The motives of those supernatural bastards who yanked them out of their worlds were a total mystery. After a pause, he said he was pretty sure there had to be some kind of reward waiting at the end. The old man raised a brow, and Seo-woon explained that in the game, when players die, they don't really die, they just get sent back to their original worlds with some rank slapped on them based on performance. The rewards probably included all the loot they managed to collect. The old man asked if he meant the items on his body. Seo-woon went further, saying maybe they could even keep the martial arts techniques they picked up here. For some, that could be life-changing. The old man didn't like that, asking why he assumed his own life wasn't full of struggles. Seo-woon told him straight he looked like some legendary martial arts master with armies of followers in his world, while back home, Seo-woon was basically nothing. That made the old man laugh and ask why he kept hovering his fingers in the air. As night faded into day, Seo-woon kept breaking down all the rules and hacks of the game for him. Eventually, the old man dropped him off somewhere safe, apologizing for taking up too much of his time. Before leaving, he asked if Seo-woon wanted anything in return. Without a second's hesitation, Seo-woon asked to learn his martial arts techniques. The old man's face turned serious, said it wasn't impossible, but he better be ready for the worst. And by worst, he meant death. To truly get power outside the normal way, the price was steep. After his dramatic little speech, Seo-woon reminded him no one actually dies in this game. That snapped the old man back to reality, and he admitted it might be doable. Seo-woon pressed him about getting stronger fast, and the old man said it was worth a shot. First, they needed to check his energy. Placing his palm on Seo-woon's head, the old man nearly jumped back in shock. His inner energy was weaker than his damn house dogs. In Seo-woon's defense, he came from a world with zero magic or martial arts, so what did they expect? The old man told him to sit in lotus position, and began the process. He warned the kid the pain would feel like death, and he wouldn't be able to move, but if he failed to endure it, he'd be done for. As the energy transfer started, Seo-woon felt everything. Every sound, every breath, even his heartbeat was booming in his skull. His lungs burned like molten lava. The pain was brutal. So intense he thought his body might actually give out. Finally, he opened his eyes, trembling like hell. The old man pulled back his hand, telling him it was over. He was impressed the kid managed to survive it. His body wasn't bad after all. His chi flow was fixed now, and his body would be different. Seo-woon had no clue what that even meant, so he asked what came next. The old guy reminded him he wanted quick strength, and explained he had just pushed his soul aside a little, carving out an inspirational gate in that space. Normally, people absorb chi through breathing, but thanks to that empty slot in his soul, Seo-woon could take in energy in other ways too. He explained that people are made up of three things: body, mind, and soul, all tied together by life, chi. When someone dies, their chi doesn't vanish. It spreads into nature, keeping the cycle alive. But there are sick bastards who think that's a waste. They kill others to steal their chi. Problem is, it doesn't always work, and most of them either lose their martial arts or die a pathetic death. The mind technique he just tattooed into Seo-woon's body would let him absorb life chi from the dead to boost his energy. Seo-woon got nervous and asked if this meant he was also going to die. The old man explained it was different for him. His soul had been tweaked to let chi flow in, and since he didn't have any inner energy to begin with, he was basically a blank canvas. That made it possible for him to absorb life chi smoothly. Plus, since they were inside the game, he could abuse this forbidden technique without consequence. Nobody really dies here. They just respawn back in their worlds. If he wanted to survive, he needed to take out the other players and suck up their energy. If he did, he'd hit some insane level of power by the end of the 100 days. After dropping that insane bomb of knowledge, the old man said his farewell and started to leave. Seo-woon quickly stopped him, asking for his name. The old man gave a knowing look, saying he was Jang Dochin, but people called him the Deep Valley Standing Kindly. The technique he taught was called the White Martial Physique Arts. Before disappearing faster than the wind, he advised Seo-woon to focus on his breathing. It would stack up inner energy and make him stronger. Finally, they parted ways. Seo-woon stood there, thinking that if he could master this forbidden technique, he might someday move with the same blinding speed as that old monster. But for now, he needed to head toward the edge of the map. Seo-woon got yeeted straight into the center of the map in a blink, but the walk back hit different. The place was massive as hell, and by the time he finally reached some houses, the sun had dipped, and night was crawling in. One house had a lantern glowing, sketchy as hell, so he crept in with his crossbow locked and loaded. Turned out it was empty, no jump scare, just dust. He started farming, but luck wasn't on his side, finding nothing but trash tier loot. Exhausted, he just crashed for the night. Morning hit, with the sound of someone sneaking around. Instantly awake, he grabbed his crossbow, camping at the door like a wolf waiting to pounce. The second the door creaked open, he let an arrow fly dead center at the guy's skull. But the player wasn't a noob. Dude was a martial artist and sliced the arrow clean in half. Seo-woon didn't flinch. He snapped back with his Black Star Chi palm, sending out a flurry of daggers that tore through the guy's guard and smashed him to the ground. With one solid kick, he knocked the sword out of his hand and aimed the arrow at his face. The man knew it was GG, begged for his life, promised to drop everything he had. Didn't matter, Seowon ended him right there, reminding himself he had to survive too. Then, something wild, he noticed a green glow around the chest the dude dropped. Looked like it was radiating life chi. He raised his hand, started absorbing that energy, and boom, his whole body felt lighter, sharper, stronger. Just one kill, and he was buzzing like he'd unlocked cheat codes. Checking his stats, he saw a new category, inner energy, 20 points already. It hyped him up, but he knew spamming kills alone wouldn't cut it. He'd need other ways to power up. While he was soaking in his new boost, the player count had already plummeted to 24, and it was only day 5. Then a name popped up on the kill feed, Nam Sagwang. That psycho was a walking nuke, wiping players like it was target practice. With blood dripping down his face, Sagwang scrolled the feed and noticed Seowon's name too, getting mildly pissed since he'd seen it earlier as well. Meanwhile, Seowon was dead set on one thing: avoid Sagwang at all costs. Right now, he could barely handle average scrubs. Facing that beast would be suicide. Digging through the chest, the best thing he found was a troll's potion. Nothing game-breaking, so he decided to lay low, hide, and outlast the chaos until the numbers dropped. Fast forward a week, he was farming for food and thinking how lucky he'd been early on not running into anyone. Problem was, the only thing to eat was jerky, and he was getting sick of that salty crap. With just 20 players left, he stayed hugging the map's edge. Sticking his hand outside the barrier even for a second felt like his flesh was on fire, proof that falling behind meant instant death. All week, the kill log was basically one name on repeat, Nam Sagwang. Then Seowon spotted smoke in the distance. Something big was going down. Turns out, it was Sagwang, surrounded by a squad of players teaming up to take him down. But instead of sweating, Sagwang laughed, thanking them for saving him the trouble of hunting. His face twisted into something monstrous as he asked if they were ready to die the same way they wanted to kill him. And then all hell broke loose. Sagwang leapt high, grabbed the first guy by the face, and crushed his skull like a soda can. In the same breath, he punched another dude's head clean off. 2 kills in 1 second. The others froze, watching a nightmare come alive. Sagwang didn't stop. He tore through them like they were paper dolls, counting each kill as if it was a damn sport. By the end, the kill feed lit up with his name over and over again. 9 bodies in 1 massacre. Seowon was trembling, realizing the guy had just soloed 9 players without breaking a sweat. Sagwang, drenched in gore, looked disgusted by the blood sticking to his skin, and walked off to wash it away. That night, the elven mage from the start of the game came across the wreckage. Spotting a staff, he recognized it. It belonged to a girl he knew. Quietly, he swore to avenge her. At the same time, our MC is crouched in the bushes, playing it sneaky while waiting for more players to drop off. He's already close to top 10, but he knows surviving this far without good loot is basically suicide. While sneaking around, he stumbles across this massive-ass mansion sitting right on the edge of the zone. The moment he steps inside, he's low-key stunned. Place looks like some royal palace dropped into the middle of the game. He digs around and finds a guard's armor, but his stats are too low to rock it, so it's straight up useless trash for him. Moving along, he comes across an elixir with a 3-hour timer that boosts internal energy. That one actually makes him stop and think he's realizing he can level up his inner power without sucking up life chi. That's pretty damn wild. As he keeps searching, he finds a martial arts book and even a hidden cellar. But right before he can head inside, boom, a massive explosion goes off, blowing the whole place to hell. He shakes off the dust and spots a mage standing there, and this bastard isn't alone. The blast was meant for Nam Sagwang, who somehow tanked it and is still standing. Sagwang tells the mage to cut the talking and throw hands instead. The mage grins like a psycho and steps up, ready for the fight. Our MC stays tucked in the bushes, wide-eyed, realizing that the monster who wiped out most of the game is just some kid. The fight kicks off, and the mage pops off with his escrow-style lightning strikes. Sagwang's just too damn fast and slips past them, pissing the mage off. The guy's screaming for Sagwang to face him head-on, like he did with that girl earlier. Sagwang, starting to see how cracked this mage really is, gets serious. He tanks multiple bolts of lightning and still dodges through before leaping in for the kill. But the mage is insane. He swings his staff hard enough to split Sagwang in half. To his shock, the body he ripped apart was just a clone. The real Sagwang is still somewhere on the ground, keeping low. Our boy Seowon is watching all this madness, even wondering if the rain he feels is just from the mage's non-stop spells. Meanwhile, the mage starts losing it. Sagwang has completely vanished. No presence detected. He rages and swears he'll hunt him down no matter what. A little distance away, Sagwang is actually limping through the trees, body beat to hell but still alive. He smiles bitterly, knowing the mage technically won this round, but he's not letting him get away next time. For now, he needs to play safe and heal up. Back at the mansion's wreck, the mage finally bails after confirming Sagwang's nowhere in sight. Thanks to his cloak of hiding, Seowon survives the chaos untouched. Once things calm down, He sneaks out and finds his lamp. Somehow, the basement entrance is still intact, so he slips in. Turns out, it's just a food shop, no loot whatsoever. Still, his stomach's growling, so he scarfs down whatever's there until he's full. About an hour later, he debates whether to down the elixir since he's got time. He also remembers the martial arts manual. The description says it was created by a dude who poured his whole life and soul into it. But here's the kicker, he never won a single damn match with it, and died pathetically without a single disciple. That makes Seo-woon doubt for a second, but in the end, he figures shit's better than nothing. He decides to gulp the elixir first, bracing for the usual painful process. This time though, it hits different. His whole body feels flooded with raw energy, then it overheats and leaves him drained, too tired to even move. When it's finally done, he just crashes, dead tired, but grateful he hasn't bumped into more players and somehow survived a battle between a psycho mage and Nam Sagwang. He wakes up the next day, checks the player count, and notices the old man is gone, apparently offed himself. Since he knew the guy, he figures the geezer must have tried some absurd training method, since there's literally no real risk in this game. The map keeps shrinking, so he knows it's time to move again. He's made it this far by sticking to his sneaky-ass strategy, and it's perfect for someone like him who honestly doesn't have any real combat skills. Moving through the forest, he suddenly gets blasted by a massive explosion, barely dodging it by a hair. The raw power alone gave away who was behind it. Up ahead stood the archmage, looking pissed off, convinced he'd sensed Sagwang nearby. He barked that if the kid didn't give up Sagwang's location, he'd kill him right there. All the while, Nam Sagwang had been lurking right behind him, grinning like a smug bastard as he listened. The mage's eyes locked coldly on Seo-woon, demanding Sagwang's whereabouts, threatening that if he didn't spill, he was as good as dead. To the mage, anyone without answers was nothing but trash. Shocked and pissed, Seo-woon fired back in frustration. Meeting this guy for the first time and already being treated like dirt was insane. He tried to explain he had no damn clue where Sagwang was hiding. Then, his expression stiffened, something caught his eye. His stomach dropped as Sagwang came crashing down from above, wrapped in blinding energy. The mage, still unaware, kept rambling, saying he only asked because Seo-woon looked like he was from the same region as Sagwang. If he wasn't, then he could just die. Suddenly, Sagwang slammed into the mage like a thunderbolt, sparks crackling all around. The mage flinched, too slow to react, realizing he'd been played. With a cocky grin, Sagwang announced he was fully recovered and mocked the mage for running low on mana. Seo-woon just stood there, stunned, as the kid powered up his fist with explosive energy and roared that he was ending it. The punch landed with brutal force, launching the mage backward in a blast of blue light. Bruised but holding on, the mage muttered that a basic attack like that couldn't hurt him, but then pain tore through his body, blood spraying as his expression twisted in horror. Sagwang sneered, hand glowing with lethal power, asking if the mage had ever heard of enhanced energy. His hand pulsed as he explained that arm energy was a rare martial art, known only to a few masters. He hadn't expected to use it here, but now the mage could feel honored for being the first. The mage wheezed, gasping for air. In a split second, Sagwang's electrified fist tore straight through his body, blood exploding everywhere as the mage screamed. Towering over the broken figure, Sagwang mocked him, asking if he had any more of those annoying spells left. He even admitted the guy could have made the top 5 if only fate hadn't thrown them together. From the sidelines, Seo-woon watched with wide eyes, stunned. He felt lucky Sagwang had shown up, but deep down, he knew this chaos was his one chance to get away. While the two clashed, he bolted. Behind him, Sagwang unleashed another savage punch, telling the mage to just die already. The ground quaked as the blast hit, blood spraying from the mage's wrecked body. Too weak to resist, the archmage got his chest pierced once again by Sagwang's sparking fist. Seo-woon froze, shaken to the core, watching the so-called mighty archmage crumble like trash. For the first time, he started to wonder how powerful he could become if he absorbed that kind of life energy. Sagwang stood over the mage, taunting him, calling his body nothing more than a half-dead corpse. He asked if there were any last words, then laughed cruelly, reminding him he couldn't even speak anymore. The mage glared back in silence, his bloody face twisted in agony. Then Sagwang heard a voice in his head, the mage speaking through telepathy. He revealed that Elizabeth, the person Sagwang killed, was his most cherished disciple. Sagwang paused, thrown off by the voice. The mage went on, explaining that Elizabeth had been kicked out of university just for being a girl. He regretted failing to protect her. Sagwang sneered, claiming that if she was really a girl, he would have noticed unless she looked too much like a man. That filthy line made the mage's face contort with rage. With a dark grin, he swore silently that he'd shut Sagwang's foul mouth for good. Sagwang's cocky smile dropped, his eyes narrowing as he demanded what the mage just said. At that same instant, Seo-woon spotted something in the sky. Everyone turned, stunned, as the mage summoned a giant meteor barreling down. Sagwang's eyes went wide, fury spilling out as he cursed at the sight, unable to grasp how the guy was still casting spells. The mage's voice echoed in his head one last time. This was his final spell, fueled by both mana and life force. Its name was Armageddon. As the meteor plummeted, the mage whispered softly to Elizabeth, saying he was ready to see her again. In a flash of red energy, he vanished, leaving behind only a chest. Then the meteor struck, shaking the earth with apocalyptic force, flattening everything in its path. Far away, an elven archer stood watching silently. The sight of that destructive magic was all the proof he needed of exactly who had cast it. Back on the ground, Siawun was wrecked, cursing himself for not running sooner. He scrambled for a healing elixir and a scroll, chugged one, activated the other, desperate as hell. The pain was still clawing at him, but he wasn't about to roll over and die. He burned through more scrolls, dumping every last resource he had. Barely clinging to life, he stood in the middle of the torn-up dirt and shredded paper, chest heaving, muttering that he could finally breathe for a bit. But then he checked his system log and something felt off. The kill record showed Nam Sagwang took down the mage, but Sagwang's death wasn't logged anywhere. A cold shiver ran down his spine as the thought hit him that the kid might still be alive. Then came a faint cry for help. Siawun followed the voice into the forest and found Sagwang barely hanging on, clutching a healing scroll in his teeth like some desperate dog. Sagwang begged him to help, since his arms were useless. Calm as stone, Siawun confirmed his identity, and the kid recognized him instantly. Sagwang admitted he always thought he'd win, that he was curious what kind of loot Siawun must have had. He promised that if Siawun helped him just this once, he'd hand over victory. But Siawun had other plans. As he pulled out a glowing purple sword, the intent was clear. If he absorbed Sagwang's strength and items, he'd secure his win for sure. Sagwang panicked, begging, spitting out warnings about stronger enemies still lurking, whining that he didn't even have good gear. But Siawun stayed cold, raised his blade, introduced himself as Jin Siawun, and got ready to strike. Sagwang screamed that even if he died now, he'd never forget this betrayal. His eyes lit up with pure hatred as he shrieked Siawun's name right before the sword slammed down. Blood sprayed violently as the blade skewered his skull. Siawun didn't even flinch. He caught his breath afterward, staring at the corpse. Watching the top dog of the game die like a helpless kid left him with a flicker of guilt. But then something wild happened. A surge of blue energy bled out of Sagwang's body and wrapped around him. The rush of power was insane, far beyond what he'd imagined. Siawun grinned, half in disbelief. Sagwang had basically turned into a walking elixir. The energy flooded him, overflowing through every inch of his body. Elsewhere, players checked the kill log and saw that Nam Sagwang was officially gone. An elven archer perched in a tree muttered that with the lion dead, the foxes would now run wild. Meanwhile, Siawun stood there glowing, staring at his hands, feeling the massive wave of inner energy pulsing inside. He thought he could crush anyone now. His eyes shifted to the glowing loot box Sagwang had left behind. As he reached for it, he wondered just how strong Sagwang had been before the game even started. There was no way someone like that avoided farming. He hoped the box wasn't empty, because that would be some bullshit. The moment he opened it, a burst of bright green light blinded him. Inside floated 5 rings, each one radiating raw power, one boosting agility, another amping strength, one cranking stamina, and 2 stacked with magic resistance. The rings hovered in the air as he stared in shock. Sliding them on, he scoffed at Sagwang for fronting like he didn't rely on gear while secretly hoarding god-tier items. The second the rings fused to him, the energy around his body spiked even harder. Opening his stats window, he almost laughed at how much his numbers skyrocketed. He clenched his fists, smirking, and muttered that he could win now for sure. Digging further through the loot, he found martial arts manuals glowing with purple energy, but they all needed advanced cultivation methods he hadn't learned yet, so they were useless for now. Moving deeper into the forest, he suddenly froze, sensing a presence. Out of nowhere, a massive wave of fire blasted him, the kind of attack only an archmage could pull off. Siawun tanked the whole thing and walked through the smoke. On the other side stood a low-level mage, mocking him for not noticing. The bastard bragged that if Siawun killed Nam Sagwang, it must have been pure dumb luck. But Siawun stepped forward unharmed, calm as hell, asking what the mage thought he was even doing. The guy's face dropped, realizing his attack hadn't even left a scratch. Siawun glanced around casually, almost confused, like he thought he saw something flicker. With his magic resistance sitting at 90, those flames couldn't even touch him. He started walking toward the mage, slow and steady, making the guy sweat bullets. Panicked, the mage threatened to cast something stronger, flames spiraling in his palms as he screamed out escrow-style flame. A second explosion hit harder than the first, but when the smoke cleared, Siawun strolled out like it was nothing, not a damn burn on him. His eyes locked on the mage's, and with a single piercing fist, he cracked him straight in the chest. The impact ripped shockwaves through the guy's body. Blood gushed from his mouth as he was launched through trees and rubble like a ragdoll. Siawun dropped his fist, stunned at the sheer power. He'd thought the move was weak, but now he wondered if martial arts scale based on inner energy. No time to waste, he finished the mage off clean. Now only 7 players were left. With his stacked resistance, average magic wouldn't even dent him anymore. But he knew deep down with Nam Sagwang out of the way, the real monsters were finally about to show themselves. Siawun was blazing through the forest, moving so damn fast it felt unreal. A grin crept across his face as he realized he could finally pull off the Elder's lightness technique. With a quiet chuckle, he thanked the old man in his head and promised he'd win this thing. An hour later, he was perched silently in a tree, cloaked in invisibility like a ghost. Out of nowhere, a voice barked his name, telling him to quit hiding. A ripped dude in a cape leapt out, swinging a massive sword, demanding a fair fight. He threw shade at Seo-woon, calling him a coward, then went on introducing himself, Stanko, the big-mouth mercenary. But mid-rant, an arrow sliced through the air. Stanko barely deflected it with his sword and roared in anger, demanding his opponent face him head-on. Seo-woon stayed hidden above, curious who just fired that shot. Stanko looked up and spotted an archer perched on a branch. He instantly knew only Zurikana could load that much aura into a single arrow. The archer, a little surprised, asked if he knew him, and Stanko said the legend of the divine archer was famous among mercenaries like them. Since they both wanted to win, he suggested teaming up to take down Seo-woon. Zurikana didn't answer. He just dropped down quietly and started walking toward him. Stanko kept yapping, hyping himself up as a well-known merc and pretending they'd make a killer team, all while mocking Zurikana in his head, thinking the guy must be dumb as hell for buying his act. But Zurikana wasn't even focused on that. He was counting seconds on his fingers, wondering if he'd messed up his timing. That's when Stanko sneered, saying an archer should never be dumb enough to close the distance himself. He swung his blade fast, ready to end him, but before he could even blink, an arrow drilled straight through his skull. Zurikana's face twisted in disgust as he spat out that he'd never cooperate with an insect like him. His only interest now was finding out where Seo-woon was hiding. Meanwhile, Seo-woon crept silently behind him with his cloak, already sucking up the leftover life chi from Stanko's corpse. Suddenly, Zurikana whipped his head back in Seo-woon's direction, making him freeze in panic. For a second, he thought the guy had some busted ability that pierced through invisibility. But nah, Zurikana was only checking Stanko's loot. He decided the items were worth keeping, and walked off without another glance. Seo-woon exhaled in relief, then locked eyes on Zurikana as his next target. After draining every last drop of Stanko's energy, he noticed a faint glow in the distance, the edge of the restricted zone. Using the Elder's technique, he darted through the dense forest with insane speed. With only 6 survivors left, and 87 days still on the clock, he started thinking the collapse of the zone might be tied to the shrinking number of players. But then the trees broke open into a massive field, and Seo-woon's gut instantly screamed bad vibes. Wide, exposed terrain like this was a damn invitation for an ambush. His fears hit home when streaks of green energy ripped through the air, aimed straight at him. He twisted and dodged, the blasts detonating around him in thunderous explosions. Whoever was casting this wasn't spamming randomly. Those shots were laser-locked on his hidden position. Confused and pissed, he couldn't figure out how the hell anyone tracked him. His cloak masked, his breath, his sound, everything. Before he could piece it together, another wave of green energy rained from the damn sky, heavier and nastier than the first. Realizing there was no way to dodge at all, Seo-woon ditched his cloak, planted his feet, and poured everything into his core. With a sharp breath, he launched a martial arts strike, a fist glowing with crackling blue energy, straight into the storm of magic. The impact was nuclear, ripping the barrage apart and shaking the entire battlefield with raw force. As the dust finally settles and chunks of debris drop around him, Seo-woon just stares at his own damn hand, looking like he can't even process the raw power he just pulled off. No time to sit there in shock, he rockets into the air, scanning the battlefield like a hawk for whoever's left lurking. His eyes lock on some poor bastard hiding in the tree line. Down below, a mage is standing frozen, muttering like a broken record, unable to believe that the massive spell he dumped all his mana into got clapped that easily. But before he can even blink, Seo-woon yells out a warning someone's right behind him. Too late. A blade shoves straight through his chest, blood pouring as he stares down at the wound like it doesn't even make sense. Behind him stands a stone-cold assassin, voice flat as hell, telling him he should have saved some juice for detection magic, or at least a barrier. For a killer like him, wiping his presence is child's play. With that execution, the mage's story ends 5 players left in the game. Seo-woon drops down onto the grass, landing quiet as a cat. The assassin turns, eyes narrowing as he recognizes him instantly. Jin Seo-woon, the one who iced Nam Sagwang. Seo-woon asks if he knows him, and the assassin just laughs it off, saying of course he does. He killed the lobby's #1 enemy. The assassin adds that the rest of the survivors must be foaming at the mouth to take him out. He tells Seo-woon not to bother resisting, since he's never failed a hit in his life. Then he bolts forward, dual blades flashing, trying to end it fast. Seo-woon throws out his signature punch, but the assassin is stupid fast, weaving past and slicing his whole arm like he's Levi on ODM gear. The assassin smirks, admitting he's tougher than expected. Seo-woon, meanwhile, knows straight up, without his internal energy keeping him alive, he'd be in pieces already. This guy isn't some weak-ass mage. This is a whole different league. The assassin grins with that cocky predator look, telling him his death's just a countdown, since no one's ever escaped his hunts in the dark. That word dark sticks in Seo-woon's head, sparking something. But before he can act on it, the assassin lifts both blades and vanishes like smoke, disappearing into nothing. Caught off guard, Seo-woon freezes. He can't feel him at all. Panic creeps in as he realizes the bastard's already behind him, blades raised to carve him apart. But just as the killing strike drops, Seowon blinks out of sight, gone. Now the assassin's the one panicking, whipping his head around, trying to find him. That's when Seowon materializes right behind him, silent, cloaked like a ghost. He snatches the assassin's wrist in an iron grip and calmly explains that hiding your body is one thing, but energy always leaves a trail, and he can track it. The assassin loses his cool, cursing him out and calling him a coward for striking from behind. Seowon's eyes go ice cold as he repeats his earlier promise, he's finishing this. The assassin gets desperate, throwing out a bargain, begging to team up and aim for first place together. But before he can even finish the sentence, Seowon cuts him down without a second thought, blood spraying across the clearing. The system chimes in, announcing the assassin's death, and the survivor count drops to 4. Seowon soaks up the life chi from both the fallen players, scooping their healing scrolls in the process. No time to celebrate, he decides to farm quick and get the hell out before more scavengers show up. Digging through the assassin's loot, Seowon finds a shadow clone manual, and it's clear as hell this guy had no business carrying it since he didn't even have internal energy. The thing lets players summon clones to fight for them. Then it clicks. That mage from earlier had a detection spell built to bust stealth skills, but his core was too weak to actually use it. Now Seowon finally gets how the mage spotted him even while invisible. Right as he's piecing this together, an arrow slices his cheek and smacks into the dirt. He spins around, stunned, only to see more arrows raining down. Panic hits this power feels on a whole different level. Too late to run. He decides to tank that shit head on, pouring every ounce of internal energy into his fist. Same move he used to block the mage's attack earlier. He manages to deflect it, but now he's wondering if 2 people are ganging up on him. Then out of nowhere, another player sucker punches him, calling him strong, and sends him skidding back. Seowon realizes he's now facing 3 bastards at once. The one who hit him is none other than Senrich, Cruzen's king, and right behind him the Demon King's right arm, Garon, and the Divine Archer, Zurikana, a squad from hell. And standing against all of them is Seowon, introduced like he's just some normal dude, outnumbered but calm as hell. Centaurk steps forward, cold glare and all, making it clear Seowon's streak of dumb luck is done. On the high ground, the demon mage and archer lock into formation, leaving him boxed in. Seowon feels the frustration kick in. He was this close to a win, and then smacked right into a stacked group. Still, he knows teams like this can crumble if you hit the weak spots. He scans them, searching for cracks, but they're unreadable. Then, out of nowhere, Garon tries brown-nosing, bowing all dramatic to Senrich and calling him by his royal title. The king looks pissed, not impressed at all, and questions his boldness. Garon laughs it off, saying titles don't mean jack here, and that teaming up with shady types is fine if it pays. Watching this clown show, Seowon realizes they weren't even planning to team up. Suddenly, he vanishes under his cloak. The king catches on instantly, and orders Garon to blow his cover. The demon mage throws up a glowing hand, golden light bursting like a damn flare. The whole area floods with brightness, burning away every shadow. Seowon flinches. His stealth cloak is now straight up useless. The mage smirks, thanking Namsagwang for taking care of the archmage, then flips into full villain mode, declaring Seowon's death in the Demon King's name. He unleashes a Chaos Blade spell, the ground ripping open as purple blades spiral out in every direction. Seowon immediately knows the deal. Mages like Garon suck up close. If he rushes before the spell fully detonates, he's got a shot. Dangerous as hell, but he dives in anyway. The blades whip around him, shredding his cloak, spraying blood, but he keeps charging, reinforcing himself with internal energy. The system hits him with bad news. Cloak's busted. Can't be used anymore. Garon watches the explosion, convinced he's finished the job, but nope. Out of the storm of blades comes Seowon, face drenched in blood, looking like a walking nightmare. He goes in with his piercing fist, but Garon's ready, grinning as he summons another spell. Massive undead hands erupt from the ground, grabbing and crushing. The energy in this one feels way nastier than before. Still, Seowon doesn't flinch. He triggers Shadow Clone, body blurring into phantom doubles, weaving through the chaos. Garon's jaw drops. The guy thought Seowon was just some physical bruiser, but now he's throwing illusions too. Seowon roars, charging for the killing blow. But before Garon can finish his barrier, Senrich turns on him, driving a piercing aura blade straight into his back. Blood sprays everywhere, the mage's eyes wide with disbelief. Betrayal hits harder than the blade. Senrich coldly says victory is all that matters, and admits he never intended to work with filth like him anyway. The system confirms the mage's death. Senrich turns to the archer, smirking that he'd been a pain in their army. Ironic they'd end up working side by side. Zurikana just smiles, saying it's too early to count wins. Before the king even processes it, Seowon slams his piercing fist right into his face, launching him straight into the wall with bone-crunching force. Seowon is gasping for air, locked on the archer, saying it's just the two of them now. He dares him to step up, but Zurikana just smirks and tells him he's got a way bigger problem in front of him. Out of nowhere, the king rises, mad as hell, claiming he felt the blade cut through him and still stunned that his armor got shredded so easily. By now, our boy Seowon doesn't even look human anymore, drenched head to toe in blood, eyes sharp like a beast. He snarls, asking if the king's gonna take him on alone or if the two of them plan to gang up. The king glares, cold as ice, saying he'll regret pushing him to use full strength. Before Seowon can react, Pain rips through him. His arm gets stabbed clean by the king's blade. Senrich laughs, bragging that no one matches his speed, explaining he targeted the ligaments so Seo-woon can't even move his arms properly. But Seo-woon ain't about to roll over now. He digs deep, shoving all his inner energy into his body, and with raw force, he shatters the blade with his fist. The king freezes, shocked, while Seo-woon yanks the shard out of his arm and whips it at his face like a damn dagger. Senrich roars in fury, screaming at how he dared scar his face. Seo-woon doesn't waste time. He rips out a healing scroll, patching himself up. The king knows shit's getting serious, so he pulls his trump card, drawing the aura blade glowing with raw power. By then, Seo-woon's arm is healed, and he answers with his shadow clone technique, flooding the place with copies of himself as his energy burns at full throttle. It's clear both of them are ready to throw down their final moves. The archer, looking bored up top, just yells for them to hurry it up. With clones lined up, Seo-woon tells Senrich this is the real fight. The king mocks him, pretending not to care, though deep down he knows his aura blade's timer is down to 2 minutes. He has to end this fast. Seo-woon feels his own energy draining, just as desperate to finish. No more stalling, he storms forward with his army of clones. The king swings his blade like a madman, but there are too many. Out of nowhere, the real Seo-woon slips in behind and smashes him with a palm strike. Senrich lashes back, cursing as he swings, only to cut into another clone. He grows more pissed, deciding to just wipe them all out. But before he can, Seo-woon plants a clean punch to his face, snapping his head sideways and making him cough up blood. While the king struggles to tell what's real, Seo-woon taunts him, saying every damn clone can hit just like him. Then he launches a brutal kick, but Senrich dodges and counters, slicing through 2 clones with his golden aura blade, erasing them instantly. He scoffs, calling them weak, then counts the remaining 5 left. Still, he ain't happy, because that blade has less than a minute left. From the cliff, Zurikana admits he didn't expect Senrich to be struggling like this. Senrich shouts up, begging for help and offering him all the rewards, but the archer just warns him to pay attention, because Seo-woon is coming in hot. The king barely reacts in time, blasting out a crushing wave of aura. Seo-woon dodges, then counters with a bone-crunching fist to the chest, blood spraying from the impact. Their clash continues. Seo-woon's follow-up strike slams into the blade, but it gets blocked. Then Senrich grins like a psycho, lunging in and stabbing deep into what he thinks is the real body. Blood splatters, only for the body to flicker and fade. Another clone. The king freezes, muttering how humiliating this is, then screaming that he doesn't give a damn about winning anymore. Zurikana just watches, entertained. Senrich's aura explodes golden, daring Seo-woon to dodge as he charges, ripping through more clones. When the dust clears, only 2 stand. 1 clone, 1 real. The king narrows his eyes, trying to pick the right one. Before he can, Seo-woon charges in, shouting that it's his turn. He slams in with a piercing fist while a clone flanks with a side strike. The combo connects, smashing the king's face again and forcing blood to spray. In a frenzy, the king stabs through a neck only to realize it was another clone, the body vanishing with no feeling in his blade. That leaves the real Seo-woon standing. Senrich points his sword at him, vowing to end it in 1 strike. The 2 lock eyes, both charging head-on, colliding mid-air with a deafening burst. Senrich snarls, giving him credit for hand-to-hand combat, but then his face darkens and he unleashes his strongest move, Aura Blade Lightning Form. Golden lightning erupts, scorching everything in sight, ripping straight into Seo-woon. The MC staggers, coughing blood, trying to tell him the only one who gains from this madness is the archer, but Senrich doesn't care. He drives his blade into Seo-woon's chest. Exhausted, the king realizes how close he was to losing. Then he looks down. His blade is broken in half. No blood, no body, just another fake. And then Seo-woon is behind him, unleashing a devastating counterattack that tears him apart, splitting Senrich open for good. Standing over the fallen body, Seo-woon thinks coldly that if his clones hadn't drained the bastard's stamina, this fight could have ended way differently. Seo-woon hears the archer running his mouth, saying he didn't expect him to actually beat Senrich. Then he even thanks him for taking care of that pain-in-the-ass bastard. Archer knocks an arrow, smirking that the king's pride made him go all in, and now Seo-woon, who also burned everything to win, has to fall by his hands too. With insane speed, he lets loose a glowing blue arrow. It slices through the air like lightning, giving Seo-woon barely a second to react. His eyes blow wide as that thing barrels at him with terrifying force. Our boy instantly sucks up the life chi from Senk. It's not on Nam Sagwang's level, but it's still enough juice to face the archer. As the blue arrow tears toward him, he pops off his shadow clone technique, splitting into multiple afterimages and bolting up the hill at breakneck speed. From above, Zurikana narrows his eyes, calling the trick annoying as hell. Cocky, he shoots another arrow with pinpoint precision. This one rips into Seo-woon's leg, nailing the real body. Seo-woon crashes down the cliff, pain exploding through him as he smacks the ground. The archer leaps down with a smug grin, saying he's making damn sure his prey doesn't run this time. He draws back, aiming for the arms to pin him to the dirt. Seo-woon, Seowon, pissed, demands how he knew which clone was real. Zurikana just shrugs and says he guessed. Looking down with that cocky smile, he admits he respects Seowon's grit, but Seowon spits back that he can shove his respect and give it to the dogs. Archer doesn't even bother replying, just looses one last arrow straight into his skull. Game over. In an instant, Seowon's body flickers and morphs into a chest, same as the others who dropped before him. A booming system voice declares the Cloyd survival game has ended. Next thing, the MC is standing in what looks like another dimension, watching his body turned into loot, muttering that someone else walked away with the prize he worked his ass off for. It stings, but he reminds himself he did the same to Nam Sagwang when that guy was defenseless. A system message congratulates him for making top 2, and tells him he's qualified for the next round. He's floored there really is another game. The message also says he's earned 140 reward coins with all his kill bonuses included. Surrounded by the stash of items he collected, Seowon is told he can spend coins however he wants. Prices vary, but his precious shadow clone technique costs nearly all his coins. At the same time, the system drops the bomb that the top 5 get to spin a roulette for random items. Since he ranked second, he gets 2 spins. That little perk gets him fired up. Maybe he can save a ton of coins if he scores either the Cloak of Invisibility or the Shadow Clone Manual. He spins, praying for a win, but the wheel stops on Escrow's necklace, the cheapest trash item on the list. Rage hits him hard, and he grabs his head, cursing why the worst possible outcome had to pop. With one chance left, he takes a deep breath, steadies himself, and practically begs every god he can think of. The wheel spins again, his heart hammering, and this time it lands on the shadow clone technique. Seowon's fist clenches tight, and he roars in victory. Against all odds, he pulled the most expensive damn prize and saved his coins. The system announces his chosen rewards are being delivered. The Shadow Clone book floats toward him, glowing. He knows once he's finished picking the rest, he'll get moved out. Staring at all the tempting options, he makes his final choices carefully. He can't linger here forever. When he's done, the system praises him, wishes him luck, and the light swallows him whole. Suddenly, he's back in the alley. Confused, he scans his surroundings, trying to piece it together. His eyes drop to his hand, and there it is, the subspace ring from Cloyd Survival. This wasn't a dream. He grabs his bag, shoulders it, and starts walking down the street. His first game is done. The world looks the same, but deep inside, he feels the shift something massive has begun. He stares at the ring, reminding himself the next game is coming. This time, he swears he won't screw it up. He'll aim for first place. Seowon then heads to the studio apartment his parents got for him near the school. He was originally supposed to stay there, study for his English test, and prepare to return to school. However, right now, his only focus is becoming stronger using the things he brought back from the game. As soon as he enters his room, he sits in the lotus position because he has no intention of entering the next game as a complete noob. He quickly notices that his energy core is empty and wonders if he used up all of his inner energy during the final battle. Thinking about it, Seowon decides it would be best to cultivate the way the old man taught him so he can recover as much energy as possible. He recalls the old man's words from the game when he said he wanted to see whether Seowon was capable of becoming as strong as him. 4 hours later, Seowon lets out a frustrated groan because the amount of inner energy he managed to gather is ridiculously small. He realizes that reality is completely different from the game, and at this rate, it could take years before he even feels any noticeable energy inside himself. Deciding not to waste any more time, he starts organizing the items he brought back. While going through them, he finds himself wishing he had obtained a better martial art. Then it suddenly occurs to him that he might have to train the martial art gradually, just like cultivating inner energy. Once he reaches that conclusion, he realizes there is no chance of becoming strong anytime soon. Just then, the system asks whether he would like to learn the martial art. At that moment, Seowon realizes that the system from the game actually works in reality as well. He immediately begins swinging his arms and legs around his room while performing the martial art technique. After finishing the learning process, he notices that it is nowhere near as impressive as when he was overflowing with inner energy. He then checks his storage to see what other items he has, and discovers that Escrow's necklace is among them. Since the necklace was supposedly made of pure gold, Seowon bites it to test its authenticity. To his surprise, it is completely real. Judging by its weight, he estimates that the gold alone would be worth at least 10 million won. The moment he realizes that the necklace only costs 1 coin in the game yet holds such enormous value in reality, a greedy goblin-like grin appears on his face. He quickly figures out that he could become rich simply by bringing back 10 of those necklaces from the next game. While the necklace may be worthless in the game world, it is incredibly valuable in reality. Another item he brought back is refined troll's blood, which supposedly guarantees a healthy life for an entire year to anyone who drinks it. He only brought it back because the effect sounded appealing, but now he realizes that if he sold it to some wealthy, terminally ill patient, he could probably charge whatever price he wanted. At this point, Seowon becomes convinced that the game is going to be a massive opportunity for him. Just then, his stomach starts growling loudly. He suddenly realizes that he has been surviving on nothing but terrible food in the game, but he never noticed how hungry he was because he had been so focused on cultivation. Deciding it is finally time to eat some proper food, he heads to a restaurant called Grandma's Dinner and orders a set meal. Before long, the 5001 meal that he once considered a luxury is placed in front of him. As he eats the delicious food, tears begin rolling down his face because he nearly died from living on jerky for so long. The grandmother notices him crying and tells him to stop because he is going to ruin his appetite. She also points out that he was eating at the restaurant just yesterday. Our boy explains that the food is simply too delicious, which is why he is crying. It is then that Seo-woon realizes the time spent inside the game does not carry over into reality. After finishing his meal, he thanks the old woman for the food. The woman tells him to stop whining and encourages him to come back again. As he walks down the street, Seo-woon starts wondering when the next game will begin because he needs more time to gather inner energy before entering it. Then he remembers the ring of strength he brought back and decides to test whether it works in reality the same way it does in the game. After equipping the ring, he decides to try a simple jump. The moment he leaps, he shoots high into the air before quickly landing back on the ground. Seo-woon is stunned by the amount of strength flowing through his body and immediately hopes nobody witnessed what just happened. He knows that if people report his abnormal strength, he could end up dragging himself into serious trouble. He quickly returns to his room because there is something else he wants to test. Earlier, he had no intention of using it, but after seeing how accurately the game's items work in reality, he changes his mind. Reaching into his storage, he pulls out the most expensive item he brought back, the Elixir of Insight, which cost 50 coins. Seo-woon remembers that in the game, using the elixir left him unable to move for 3 hours while his insides felt like they were burning. Even so, he gulps it down. The moment the liquid enters his body, the effect activates instantly. Energy erupts from every pore in his body, causing him to scream in agony. 3 hours later, Seo-woon's neighbor ends up calling the police because the wall separating their rooms has become hot. When 2 officers arrive, the woman explains that she tried knocking on her neighbor's door, but the handle was too hot to touch. The officers tell her she should have called the fire department instead. The woman argues that although everything was hot, there was no sign of a fire. One of the officers suggests that the resident probably turned the boiler up too high. However, the old woman insists that something is clearly wrong. To settle the matter, one of the officers approaches the door and grabs the handle. The instant he touches it, he yells in pain because it burns his hand. The old woman immediately takes the chance to tell them she was right. The officers begin calling for the resident and tell Seo-woon to open the door. Hearing them, Seo-woon slowly opens it. The officers are shocked to see sweat pouring down his face. Seo-woon casually explains that he has a bit of a fever and simply turned up the boiler. Even though his face is bright red from the heat, he still jokes that the fire department should have been called instead of the police. The officers explain that they still have to respond whenever someone files a complaint. They ask if he needs an ambulance, but Seo-woon refuses, claiming it is only a mild cold and that some rest will solve everything. Since he insists that he is fine, the officers eventually leave. Before going, they tell the old woman not to call them over issues like this, because it only creates unnecessary work for them. After closing the door, Seo-woon collapses onto the floor while thinking about how close he came to dying. The energy inside the elixir had boiled through his body like fire, and if he had not possessed the white martial physique arts, he would never have been able to contain it. This makes him realize that unlike the game, using elixirs in reality still carries significant risks. Even so, he wants to test his skills. He uses Unstoppable Fist and thrusts his palm forward. A powerful force instantly erupts and completely destroys his chair. Seeing the result, Seo-woon understands just how effective the techniques are. At the same time, he realizes he is going to have to sell some of the items he brought back if he wants enough money to replace the chair he just destroyed. The following day, Seo-woon heads to a public outdoor gym to practice and improve his skills. Unfortunately, he quickly realizes it was a bad idea because the place is packed with people. While training, he notices a group of delinquent high school students. Their leader is smoking a cigarette when an elderly man approaches and tells him that students should not be smoking. The teenager rudely tells the old man to get lost, claiming that even his own parents do not complain about his smoking. The old man responds by saying that his parents must have done a poor job raising him. The comment instantly angers the teenager, and Seo-woon can tell things are about to get ugly. The boy raises his hand to slap the old man, but before he can do anything, Seo-woon suddenly appears and kicks him directly in the face. The teenager is launched into a nearby wall and ends up completely helpless. Seo-woon confidently tells him that no matter how rude the old man was, he has no right to hit an elderly person. At that moment, a much larger high school student arrives. Seo-woon quickly realizes the situation has become far more troublesome than he intended. It turns out the boy he just kicked is the larger student's younger brother. The older brother asks whether Seo-woon was responsible for beating him up. Seo-woon replies that the younger brother started the problem by showing no respect toward an elder. He goes on to explain that students should know smoking in public can get them into trouble. He even laughs and tells the older brother that he should have educated his sibling better. Seo-woon admits he may have gone a little too far, but claims he had no other choice. While he is still talking, the bigger student suddenly throws a punch at him. Seo-woon effortlessly dodges the attack and responds with a punch of his own. The hit sends the larger student flying. The teenager groans in pain and coughs up blood. Seeing this, Seo-woon immediately panics because he failed to control his strength properly. Instead of backing down, the teenager becomes even more reckless. He pulls out a butterfly knife and declares that he is going to kill Seo-woon. Watching this, Seo-woon realizes the two brothers are exactly alike. The older brother charges forward and slashes with the knife, but Seo-woon easily avoids the attack. The teenager swings again, yet Seo-woon dodges once more without any difficulty. As the fight continues, Seo-woon realizes that battling ordinary people is far too easy for him now. Growing tired of the knife attacks, he sweeps low and kicks the teenager's foot, knocking him to the ground. Before attacking again, Seo-woon reminds himself that he must control his power. If something goes terribly wrong, his life could be ruined. He decides to use only half of his strength and strikes, with the undefeated palm strike. Even at 50% power, the teenager is launched through the air. He crashes into a tree, and his face ends up horribly disfigured. Everyone nearby watches in shock and immediately begins taking pictures. Ironically, Seo-woon is even more shocked than the spectators because he never intended to hit the guy that hard. Nervously, he even jokes with the unconscious teenager, telling him to stop pretending. Seo-woon then walks over to the two brothers and warns them to behave themselves from now on. Before the situation can become even messier, he quickly leaves the scene. As he walks away, regret begins to fill his mind. He realizes it was a terrible idea to display his strength against ordinary people. If either of the brothers had died, his life would have been completely ruined. Because of that, Seo-woon concludes that he desperately needs proper training so he can gain perfect control over his strength. A month passes, and Seo-woon is meditating in his room when he receives a call from his mother. She asks whether he has eaten, and explains that she became worried because she had not heard from him in a while. She then asks how the academy is going, and Seo-woon replies that it is manageable. Obviously, he cannot tell her that he has been spending his time training in martial arts instead of studying. He asks about his father, but his mother suddenly delivers shocking news. His father was involved in a car accident. Seo-woon immediately panics and starts asking how serious it is and how it happened. His mother explains that the accident occurred while his father was making deliveries. A car had run a red light and crashed into him. To make matters worse, the surgery costs are extremely high, and she is already worried about how they will pay for it. Then she says something that breaks Seo-woon's heart, asking if he has any money left from his allowance that he could send to help them. Trying to stay calm, Seo-woon asks how much the surgery will cost. His mother tells him it will be around 1 to 2 million won. Hearing that, Seo-woon reaches into his storage and takes out Escrow's necklace. He tells his mother not to worry because he may have a way to solve the problem. Promising to call her back soon, he immediately leaves his room. As he rushes out, memories of his parents flood his mind. They had spent their entire lives moving from one rented house to another, constantly struggling to get by. His father worked harder than anyone he knew, yet as he grew older, his income continued shrinking. Since his job could easily be replaced by someone else, he was forced to switch workplaces repeatedly. Thinking about all of this, Seo-woon cannot stop the tears from falling. He feels like he has been a burden on his family ever since he was born. However, he decides that he is done being that helpless child. Soon, he arrives at a jewelry shop and asks an attendant how much the necklace is worth. After examining it, the woman admits that it is an exceptionally well-crafted piece, though it does not appear to be a local item. Seo-woon quickly lies and claims that the necklace has been passed down through his family for 5 generations. Before the woman can continue talking, he simply asks for its value. She questions whether he really wants to sell it to a shop because it could be worth much more elsewhere. Seo-woon explains that his father urgently needs surgery and that he has no other choice. Understanding the situation, and knowing that he lacks any certificate of authenticity, the woman decides to help him. Shortly afterward, the deal is completed and Seo-woon receives more than 10 million won. He knows that amount will be enough to keep his parents financially secure for the time being. He can also tell from the attendant's excitement that he probably sold the necklace for less than its true value, but he is not upset because what he needed was quick cash. Instead, he concludes that he simply needs to find better ways to sell future items he brings back from the game. Afterward, Seo-woon sends a large amount of money to his mother and immediately calls her. She is stunned when she sees how much he transferred and asks where he got that kind of money. Worried, she even wonders if he took out a loan. Seo-woon lies and tells her that it came from savings he accumulated during his time in the army. His mother apologizes for causing him trouble, but Seo-woon reassures her that she has nothing to worry about. He also promises that he will visit the hospital soon. Later, while riding a train home, he overhears several people talking about a video that is spreading online. The video supposedly shows a man launching a fireball from his palm. Everyone discussing it is amazed, but Seo-woon immediately recognizes it as a spell from Cloyd's survival. A cold sweat runs down his face as he realizes that he is not the only person in Korea who has been pulled into the game. Moments later, the video disappears again, and the men complain that it keeps getting deleted every time someone uploads it. Elsewhere, an agency is holding a meeting about these mysterious videos. The boss demands to know what is happening, and his subordinates explain that the number of survivors has increased dramatically, making it difficult to keep track of everyone. Furious, The boss throws an ashtray at the employee who spoke and shouts that the number of agents should have increased along with the growing number of survivors. He also orders them to bring in the person who keeps uploading the fireball video, believing him to be an attention seeker. The employee quickly assures his boss that he will handle it, but the boss only gets angrier and yells at him to stop bleeding because if blood stains his carpet, he will kill him. Another agent steps forward and uses a healing ability on the injured man. In the end, the boss screams at all of his subordinates to get moving and bring the entire situation under control. Another month passes, and throughout that entire time, Seo-woon never stops training. During those 2 months of preparation, he manages to gather a decent amount of inner energy and has even become accustomed to using it. However, his biggest problem is that his current reserves are still far too low. With the amount of inner energy he possesses right now, he can only summon a single shadow clone, and even then, it cannot remain active for very long. Despite this limitation, Seo-woon uses the clone as a sparring partner because it provides an efficient way to train. Unfortunately, the training sessions never last long since the clone disappears so quickly. This leaves him disappointed because, back in the game, he was able to control 8 shadow clones simultaneously while fighting Censure. He starts wondering if he burned through too much inner energy during that battle, because his current Dantian feels incredibly pathetic in comparison. After finishing his training for the night, Seo-woon decides to return home and continue cultivating. He knows there is no point dwelling on the past or complaining about his current condition. As he heads back, he notices that he is feeling a little hungry after all the training. Because of that, he decides to check his subspace storage to see whether there is anything useful inside that he might have forgotten about. While sorting through the contents of his storage, a bright light suddenly engulfs him. Before he can react, he is instantly transported back to the game lobby, where numerous other players are already gathered and waiting. Seo-woon quickly looks around and notices that several people seem just as confused as he was during his first experience with the game. While he is still trying to confirm whether he has truly returned to the game world, a message appears before him thanking the participants. The system then announces that a tutorial for the game will now be provided. Hearing this, Seo-woon is genuinely surprised because the tutorial was completely skipped during his first entry. A smile appears on his face as he realizes what this means. Since a tutorial is being given, there must be a large number of new players participating this time. Looking around further, he spots a high school student casually sitting on top of the giant statue. Judging from the uniform, the boy is clearly a Korean high school student. Seo-woon immediately ignores him because the guy is obviously trying to attract attention and show off, something he considers typical behavior for modern teenagers. Even so, Seo-woon suspects that the student has participated in the game before. All he can do is hope that the kid is nowhere near as powerful as Nam. A short while later, the participants are informed that a total of 200 players are taking part in the current game. They are also told that the minimum requirement is simply to survive and remain within the top 200 rankings. The selected map for this round is the Valley of Contras, and rewards will begin being distributed, starting from rank 20. The moment Seo-woon reads that information, he immediately realizes there is practically no risk of failing the basic objective. Since survival alone guarantees success, he comes to a simple conclusion. If there is no risk of failure, then he is free to play this game as recklessly and aggressively as he wants. After the tutorial ends, Seo-woon is already expecting everyone to be thrown straight into the game. However, something completely unexpected happens. The system announces that this round will be a duo game, and instructs all players to find a partner for duo registration. The rules explain that the match will continue until only one team remains alive. Even if only one member of a team survives until the end, both teammates will still receive the rewards. Another notification appears, informing everyone that they have 5 minutes to either form a duo or enter the game alone. Seo-woon quickly realizes that the player count is much higher this time, which is probably why the system introduced the duo format. Even so, he is not a fan of teaming up because a useless teammate would only become dead weight. The first person who comes to mind is the high school student he noticed earlier, since the guy seems likely to be a capable player. Unfortunately, when Seo-woon looks toward the top of the statue, the student has already disappeared. With no better option, Seo-woon starts searching for anyone willing to partner with him. He moves around the lobby asking other players, but most of them have already found teammates. He continues searching desperately until the timer nearly expires, yet he still fails to find anyone. Accepting reality, Seo-woon decides that playing solo is better than wasting any more time. As soon as the countdown ends, the game begins and all participants are deployed into the Valley of Contras. Looking down from the sky, Seo-woon spots several villages scattered throughout the valley, and chooses one that seems promising for looting. His plan is simple: land there and eliminate anyone who gets in his way. The moment he touches the ground, he notices 3 other teams landing nearby. Without hesitating, he immediately rushes toward one of the landing zones. Ever since the end of the first game, he has replayed every moment of it countless times in his mind. He spent months running endless mental simulations and preparing for this exact opportunity. One unfortunate player is still suffering from motion sickness when Seo-woon suddenly appears behind him and lands a devastating punch. The player cries out in pain and demands to know why he is being attacked, but Seo-woon completely ignores him and knocks him unconscious. Right then, the system informs Seo-woon that he must finish the opponent because the player's teammate still has a chance to revive him. Seo-woon is actually impressed by this mechanic and immediately finishes the job. However, the moment he does, the victim's teammate appears. The newcomer is clearly a tank-type fighter. He charges aggressively at Seo-woon, sending a chill through his body. The impact forces Seo-woon backward, but he manages to maintain his balance and avoid falling. The opponent is covered in armor and carries a lance. He asks if Seo-woon was the one who killed his teammate, but Seo-woon ignores the question and focuses on analyzing him instead. From what he can see, the enemy specializes in close-range combat. Since Unstoppable Fist relies on fighting with bare hands, Seo-woon knows that dealing with weapons such as spears, swords, and bows is one of its greatest weaknesses. In reality, facing armed opponents head-on is incredibly dangerous, which is why he has spent so much time practicing through image training. Rather than feeling afraid, Seo-woon actually smiles because he finally has a chance to test the techniques he has been working on. The armored player thrusts his lance forward, and Seo-woon immediately moves in. Just before the sharp tip can strike him, he uses his palm to redirect the lance and alter its trajectory. The sudden movement creates an opening, and the opponent is shocked to see his attack deflected so easily. Before he can react, Seo-woon unleashes a powerful spatial strike. The attack tears a massive hole through the man's chest. Not giving him any chance to recover, Seo-woon crushes the man's helmet and then stomps his head with his foot, wiping out the entire team. The moment the enemy dies, his chi flows into Seo-woon. He is surprised by the amount he absorbs and admits that nothing compares to the efficiency of gathering chi inside the game. With one team eliminated, Seo-woon calculates that 4 players remain in the area around him. Unfortunately, he does not even get a moment to rest. An arrow suddenly flies toward his head, and he barely manages to dodge it in time. The projectile buries itself in a nearby wall. Seo-woon quickly traces the arrow's path, trying to locate the shooter, but before he can do anything, another arrow streaks toward him. This one comes dangerously close and slices across the left side of his face. He barely has time to react before multiple arrows begin raining toward him. Realizing he cannot stay exposed, Seo-woon immediately sprints into the forest. As he runs, he is forced to admit that the archer's accuracy is frightening, especially from such a long distance. For a brief moment, he wonders if the shooter might be Zuro, but he quickly dismisses the idea because the attacks are nowhere near Zuro's level. While weaving through the trees, Seo-woon starts considering the possibility that the archer may have a teammate nearby. Even so, he is not overly concerned. In his mind, the moment he pinpoints the archer's location, that hidden teammate will inevitably reveal themselves as well. Seo-woon soon reaches the rooftops and finds himself comparing the current game to his first one. Back then, he would have been focused entirely on looting and hiding, but things are different now. His main goal is gathering chi, which means every enemy player has essentially become a source of fuel for his growth. Just then, an arrow suddenly strikes him straight in the head, seemingly blowing a hole through it. However, the archer immediately senses that something is off. Even though he appears to have landed a perfect shot, Seo-woon somehow vanishes from the rooftop. What the archer doesn't realize is that he only destroyed Seo-woon's shadow clone. Before he can process what happened, the real Seo-woon appears inside the room where he is hiding and delivers a powerful kick that sends him crashing to the ground. Surprisingly, Seo-woon quickly realizes that he didn't hit the real archer either. Moments later, the actual archer appears behind him, revealing that he had been using the cloak of hiding. The archer immediately fires multiple arrows, but Seo-woon dodges every attack. Realizing he is at a disadvantage, the archer leaps out of the building and tries to escape. Seo-woon chases after him, eventually cutting off his path. He tells the archer that using such a valuable cloak in broad daylight was a foolish decision. According to Seo-woon, if the archer had simply hidden and camped, he could have easily climbed much higher in the rankings. Just as Seo-woon is about to finish him off, the archer's teammate suddenly arrives. Now facing 2 opponents, Seo-woon finds himself trapped between an archer and a swordsman wielding dual blades. For a moment, he regrets not killing the archer immediately before reinforcements arrived. Still, there is no point dwelling on it because he is now stuck in a 2 versus 1 battle. Then an interesting thought occurs to him. While it looks like he is outnumbered, he actually has the advantage because he can create additional numbers. As the 2 enemies prepare to attack, Seo-woon summons a shadow clone and immediately runs. The archer targets him and fires a triple shot attack that seemingly kills him instantly. The archer smiles in satisfaction, only for Seo-woon to suddenly appear behind him and drive an attack straight through his chest before he can react. Seo-woon mocks him, explaining that just because his eyes tell him someone is standing in a certain place does not mean that person is actually there. With the archer defeated, only the dual sword user remains. The swordsman concludes that Seo-woon must be some kind of illusionist because of all the strange tricks he keeps using. Seo-woon casually responds that he is merely a returning student and reminds the man that if he wants to revive his teammate, he will have to defeat him first. The swordsman rushes forward at incredible speed, declaring that not only will he beat Seo-woon, but he will also survive until the very end of the game. He unleashes a powerful double strike attack, and Seo-woon prepares a counter, but his plan immediately falls apart because he underestimated his opponent's speed. Before he can react, the swordsman has already slipped behind him. Seo-woon instantly realizes that he would have died on the spot if he had not reinforced his body with inner energy. The swordsman confidently points out that surviving such an attack is impressive and admits that Seo-woon possesses more than just illusion tricks. He then warns Seo-woon that his neck will be the next target. While analyzing the situation, Seo-woon realizes that if he cannot finish this opponent in a single hit, he needs to find another way to counter him. More specifically, he has to overcome the swordsman's overwhelming movement speed. Then something clicks in his mind. Since this game mode has no penalty for failure, there is a risky method he can attempt. Instead of relying on his eyes to track the enemy, he decides to sense his opponent through energy and killing intent. As the swordsman charges again, Seo-woon closes his eyes. He knows that if he cannot overcome an obstacle this early, he has no chance of reaching first place. After 2 months of cultivating inner energy, he is no longer the same person he used to be. By the time he opens his eyes again, the fight is already over. He has successfully taken down the swordsman and pinned him to the ground. The defeated player struggles furiously and demands to know how Seo-woon managed to block his ultimate attack so easily. Instead of answering, Seo-woon slams the man's head into the ground and finishes him off. At that moment, he realizes that he has broken through yet another personal wall. With 2 entire teams eliminated, the player count drops to 196. The swordsman leaves behind a large amount of chi, which Seo-woon happily absorbs. Afterward, he searches through the archer's loot and discovers a recovery scroll, which he uses immediately. Unfortunately, he also realizes that the cloak of hiding was damaged during their battle. The discovery is painful because he knows that such an item could have easily carried him toward the top rankings. Even so, he decides to keep it, since it may still prove useful later. Continuing his search, he finds a lightning-struck cottonwood bow, a weapon capable of firing arrows infused with faint lightning energy. Seo-woon does not fully understand what the system means by lightning energy because he never felt anything unusual from the arrows fired at him earlier. Alongside the bow, he also finds a multi-shot skill book that allows users to fire multiple arrows simultaneously. This revelation makes him realize that the archer was not originally an archer at all and had learned the skill inside the game. Seo-woon immediately learns the technique himself and decides to test it. The arrow he fires creates a surprisingly destructive impact, convincing him that this bow is far superior to the crossbow he used during the previous game. Satisfied with his gains, Seo-woon decides to take a short break, gather more loot, and recover before continuing his hunt. After spending some time searching through the houses, Seo-woon fails to find anything particularly valuable and concludes that it is simply because they are ordinary village homes. He starts wondering whether there might be rare items hidden somewhere, similar to the cloak of hiding. While standing near a window, he notices a tall tower in the center of the town and immediately figures that such a landmark would be one of the best places to find loot. He heads straight there and notices that the door is still locked, which suggests that nobody has entered it yet. After going inside, he closes the door behind him just to be safe and begins climbing toward the top. Unfortunately, when he finally reaches the highest floor, he finds absolutely nothing useful. The discovery leaves him completely disappointed. Frustrated, he punches the wall and complains about how things never seem to go according to plan in this game. While looking out from the tower, he suddenly notices 2 players below, casually looting houses as though they were the only participants in the entire match. As he considers how to deal with them, he sees the pair heading directly toward the tower. Because the door is closed, they assume nobody has entered before them. The moment they step inside, they discover a healing scroll and immediately treat it as a sign of good luck. Watching from above, Seo-woon realizes he completely overlooked that scroll because it was buried among so much worthless junk. Still, he is thankful he missed it because it ended up becoming the perfect bait. Seeing how excited they are over a simple healing scroll, Seo-woon quickly concludes that the 2 players are complete beginners. Without wasting a second, Seo-woon dives down from above, aiming to take them out before they can react. The 2 players notice a shadow suddenly appearing on the ground, and before they understand what is happening, Seo-woon lands between them. Just from the fact that the mage does not immediately cast a barrier, Seo-woon can tell that the guy is inexperienced. He instantly targets the mage and lands a punch. Before he can finish him off, however, the mage unleashes a flame attack. Seo-woon dodges it effortlessly, causing the spell to strike the mage's own teammate instead. The burning player immediately yells at the mage for setting him on fire. The mage hurriedly apologizes, explaining that he was aiming for Seo-woon. Once the flames die down, the 2 finally realize that Seo-woon is fighting alone without a teammate and decide to gang up on him. The axe-wielding player swings repeatedly, but Seo-woon effortlessly dodges every attack. The more the axe user attacks, the more frustrated he becomes. Unbeknownst to him, Seo-woon is carefully manipulating his movements and guiding him exactly where he wants him to go. Eventually, the axe swings right into the mage. The axe user immediately apologizes and claims it was an accident, while the mage says he understands but desperately asks him to pull the weapon out. Before that can happen, Seo-woon suddenly appears behind the mage and smashes his head in, finishing him off. He even mocks the axe user, thanking him for helping him land the final blow. Seo-woon admits that he originally wanted to kill both of them with a single strike, but the axe user's armor covering his chest complicated things. Looking at the heavily armored player, Seo-woon wonders if the weight of the armor armor is slowing him down due to the usual mobility drawbacks that come with heavy equipment. Enraged, the axe user attacks again, but Seowon leaps into the air to avoid the strike. The man watches in horror as Seowon descends with a powerful kick aimed directly at his head. Seowon then jumps away again, prompting the axe user to confidently declare that he cannot stay airborne forever. The moment Seowon comes back within range, the player unleashes a devastating aura strike. The attack slices through Seowon and nearly cuts the tower in half. Seowon admits that the man's raw power is impressive, but points out that brute force alone will not get him out of this situation. Furious, the axe user charges forward again and tells Seowon to keep talking once he is dead. The battle continues to intensify as Seowon blocks and avoids the attacks. What the axe user does not realize is that he is actually fighting a shadow clone the entire time. Meanwhile, the real Seowon is standing behind him, openly mocking him for battling a shadow. When Seowon steps out from the building, the player finally notices him and demands to know when he got there. Seowon completely ignores the question and instead focuses on the tower that was nearly split apart by the aura strike. He jokingly asks the man whether he is curious about what would happen if someone kicked the weakened structure. Then he does exactly that. While the confused player continues asking who he has been fighting all this time, it finally dawns on him that his opponent was never real. Panic immediately sets in as he realizes the tower is collapsing. He desperately begs Seowon to save him, but it is already too late. The tower crashes down on top of him and kills him instantly. Only after the man dies does Seowon realize a major mistake. Since the player was crushed by the tower instead of being directly killed by him, he does not receive credit for the kill. Annoyed with himself, he calls himself an idiot for overlooking something so obvious. Fortunately, the loot chest still spawns beneath the rubble. Seowon is relieved because otherwise he would have been forced to dig through the wreckage like a dog searching for scraps. He begins opening the chests and discovers a variety of useful items, including rings and manuals. Once he finishes looting everything, he decides it is time to move on. Among the items, he even finds a mage's robe that can block wind and rain, although it provides no actual defensive benefits. Around this time, he notices that the safe zone is beginning to shrink. Marking the center of the map as his destination, he prepares to head there. After checking the remaining houses and finding nothing else worth taking, Seowon leaves the village behind. Although the journey ahead is quite long, he is able to travel much faster thanks to mastering the same movement technique that the old man once used. A short while later, Seowon arrives at an area where the system informs him that he has entered a monster spawn zone. Apparently, certain maps contain designated areas where monsters continuously appear. The system also explains that a boss monster can spawn in these zones, and defeating it rewards players with a special item. On top of that, there are buff monsters that grant temporary bonuses to whoever kills them. Seowon quickly realizes that this game contains far more mechanics than the previous one, and immediately complains about the system failing to provide such important information beforehand. Before he can think much more about it, a piercing screech echoes through the area, forcing him to cover his ears. Looking toward the source, he discovers two players fighting monsters nearby. Taking advantage of their distraction, Seowon quietly sneaks closer and observes them. The pair consists of a mage and a swordsman. The swordsman cuts down monsters with his blade techniques, while the mage supports him from behind by firing lightning spells. Seeing an opportunity, Seowon draws his bow and takes aim. An arrow suddenly flies toward the duo and barely misses the mage. Realizing they are under attack, the mage immediately warns his teammate that they are being ambushed, and urges him to stop fighting the monsters so they can deal with the hidden enemy. However, the swordsman refuses, insisting that they are almost finished with the monsters and should secure the rewards first. The mage argues that rewards will not matter if another player wipes them out. Watching from afar, Seowon notices the growing disagreement between them and decides to take full advantage of their internal conflict. Seowon continues firing lightning-infused arrows at the pair. The mage barely manages to block the attacks and is immediately told by the swordsman to put up another barrier. Annoyed, the mage snaps back that he already knows that and quickly creates another defensive barrier. Even so, he doubts it will last much longer and suggests retreating. The swordsman stubbornly refuses because abandoning the fight now would mean losing all the rewards from the monsters. He insists that they finish the monsters first and deal with the ambusher afterward. Just then, the barrier shatters. In response, the mage erects a large defensive wall. Seeing this, the swordsman completely loses his temper and demands to know what the mage is thinking. Meanwhile, Seowon is secretly delighted because the wall makes things even easier for him. Inside the enclosure, the mage explains that constantly casting barriers wastes too much mana, so he believes a wall is a better solution. The swordsman immediately points out the obvious flaw. The wall also prevents them from locating their attacker. The mage argues that Seowon will not be able to cross the wall anyway, but the swordsman reminds him that the wall practically announces their exact location. The mage insists that they simply keep fighting until the wall disappears. As they continue battling the monsters, the swordsman warns that he will disband their team if the mage pulls something this stupid again. Their argument is interrupted when the wall proves completely useless. A rain of arrows suddenly descends on them from above. Although they survive the first barrage, the swordsman urgently asks whether the wall can be removed. The mage reveals that it will take around 5 minutes. Outside the wall, Seo-woon calmly pulls out a magic explosion scroll. The scroll detonates 10 seconds after activation. He attaches it to an arrow, counts to 5, and then fires it directly into the enclosure. While the two teammates continue arguing, the arrow lands between them and erupts into a massive explosion that devastates everything around it. After the blast, one of the serpents from the area charges towards Seo-woon, but he casually kills it with a single strike. Moments later, the mage crawls out of the rubble, only to realize that surviving the explosion was a mistake. The instant he lifts his head, he finds himself staring down Seo-woon's arrow. Seo-woon mockingly thanks the mage for voluntarily trapping themselves behind the wall, explaining that this is exactly why he is about to profit from their loot. Knowing he is already finished, the mage simply closes his eyes. Seo-woon fires an arrow through his head, and a chest immediately appears. He quickly realizes that the swordsman had already died in the explosion. Going through the loot, Seo-woon discovers the 7-star cultivation art manual, which serves as the foundation for the 7-star sword art. The system asks whether he wants to replace white physique arts with the new cultivation technique, but he immediately refuses. That makes the manual practically useless to him, although he is relieved that not everything is worthless. Inside the swordsman's chest, he finds Tokar's ring, and concludes that this item was probably what allowed the man to survive the explosion long enough to leave a chest behind. Afterward, Seo-woon searches the rubble for the mage's chest. He is thrilled when he opens it and discovers another escrow's necklace. He also finds a grimoire, but its requirements are far beyond his current level, making it impossible to learn. Once the looting is finished, Seo-woon turns his attention to the remaining serpents that had been troubling the duo. He wipes them out with ease, and is honestly disappointed that the two players struggled against such weak monsters. To his surprise, the serpents drop items after dying. One of the drops is called Tears of Lamia, a material used for magical experiments and item crafting. He also obtains Tyron's necklace, which slightly boosts agility. While he immediately recognizes the usefulness of the necklace, he has no idea what practical purpose the Tears of Lamia serve. Finally, Seo-woon finds a quiet location and begins cultivating his inner energy. As he meditates, he starts considering whether he should hunt one of the buff monsters to gain an advantage. At the same time, he wonders if he is currently strong enough to challenge a boss monster. More importantly, he cannot help but question whether the other players are already thinking along the same lines. On the second day, Seo-woon checks the remaining player count and realizes that 60 participants have already died. Out of those eliminations, only 8 belong to him, which he does not find particularly impressive. With that in mind, he decides to continue moving toward the marker he previously placed at the center of the map. As he travels through the scorching desert, he cannot help but miss the pleasant weather from the first game. The heat is so intense that he starts wondering whether it would have been smarter to wait until sunset before traveling. While making his way across the desert, he suddenly spots a bird flying overhead, carrying a chest. Instantly suspecting that it is a supply drop, Seo-woon wastes no time and begins chasing after it. He manages to reach it before anyone else, but just as he is about to open the chest, the system issues a warning. If he opens the supply drop, his location will be revealed every 30 minutes for the next 6 hours through a red beacon of light. Despite the obvious danger, Seo-woon decides the potential rewards are worth the risk and opens the chest anyway. The moment the chest is opened, a red light shoots into the sky and exposes his location. Immediately feeling the pressure, Seo-woon knows he has to collect the loot and disappear before other players arrive. Fortunately, the first item he finds completely justifies the risk. Inside the chest is another cloak of hiding. On top of that, he discovers a red cloud pill, a spiritual elixir capable of greatly increasing inner energy. The drawback, however, is that it leaves the user unable to move for 10 hours after consumption. He also finds a 4th circle stone, an item that allows someone to master 4th circle magic or higher, but using it causes the user to remain immobile for 3 hours. The final major reward is the Windblade Grimoire, which grants the Cloud Stride skill and allows the user to move like the wind. The speed of the technique scales with the user's internal energy. After reviewing everything, Seo-woon realizes that the Cloak of Hiding is nearly useless during broad daylight, while the Red Cloud Pill and 4th Circle Stone are too risky to use right now. Even so, he knows that surviving the next 6 hours will make the supply drop more than worthwhile. Since he cannot use the other items immediately, he decides to learn the Cloud Stride skill first, so he can escape danger more effectively. After mastering the technique, Seo-woon begins racing across the desert at incredible speed. However, it is not long before he senses enemies heading toward his location. Since they are still some distance away, he believes he can outrun them, but he remains cautious because he has no idea what tracking abilities or movement skills they might possess. To throw them off his trail, Seo-woon comes up with a simple trick. He drops a chest and hides nearby, hoping the pursuers will take the bait. Before long, 2 players arrive and discover the chest. They almost realize it is a decoy, but their attention is caught when they find the Tears of Lamia inside. The duo appears to consist of a Roman-style warrior and a mage. After examining the chest, rest, the warrior concludes that Seowon must have looted the supply drop as quickly as possible before fleeing the area. Convinced of this theory, the pair begins following the direction they believe he escaped in. Hidden nearby, Seowon watches everything unfold and is pleased that they fell for the trap so easily. Knowing the red beacon will reveal his position again in only 30 minutes, he decides that his top priority is creating as much distance between himself and his pursuers as possible before the next signal appears. 30 minutes later, Seowon is taking a short rest when he uses detection magic to check his surroundings. To his surprise, the number of players chasing him has increased significantly. Even though they are not right on top of him yet, they are definitely getting closer. This makes him wonder whether a large number of players have already gathered around the center of the map. Just then, the red beacon activates again. The moment it reveals his location, massive fireballs begin raining down from the sky. Seowon immediately dashes away and barely escapes before the explosions hit. Watching the destruction behind him, he suddenly realizes how quickly his pursuers are closing the distance. The speed at which they are catching up is alarming, making him suspect that they are using some sort of movement technique. A moment later, two figures emerge from the flames, and Seowon is shocked when he realizes they are riding horses. As the pair rapidly closes in on him, he activates his shadow clone technique. Unfortunately, the clones are destroyed almost instantly. Rather than confusing the pursuers, it only seems to make them even more determined to kill him. The Roman warrior suddenly hurls a spear at him, catching Seowon completely off guard. He cannot believe they have already seen through his tricks. The spear narrowly misses his head but slices across his face before embedding itself in the ground. Seowon immediately grabs the spear, channels his inner energy into it, and throws it back. The weapon flies with terrifying force and pierces straight through the warrior's arm, even breaking through his armor. The warrior instantly realizes that Seowon is far more dangerous than he originally thought, and admits to his teammate that they would have been in serious trouble if Seowon had allies backing him up. Before the confrontation can continue, arrows suddenly come flying in from behind. Seowon dodges them, but the projectiles strike the horses instead. He barely has time to react before another volley follows, finishing the horses off completely. Turning around, Seowon discovers that a new team has arrived. It is a duo of archers, and he has now become trapped between two enemy teams. The situation leaves him deeply frustrated because getting caught in a pincer attack is one of the worst positions he could possibly be in. Interestingly, neither team immediately attacks. Instead, they hesitate and keep their distance, each waiting to see who will deal with Seowon first. Picking up on this hesitation, Seowon begins taunting the archers and asks where all their confidence from earlier disappeared to. He points out the obvious reality of the situation. Among the three teams present, at least two teams are not making it out alive. Seowon quickly figures out what both sides are thinking. The archers would prefer to have him join them, so they can eliminate the Roman warrior and mage first. If they kill Seowon immediately, they would be left in a risky 2 versus 2 battle with no guarantee of victory. From their perspective, turning the fight into a 2 versus 1 would be much safer. Realizing this, Seowon starts formulating a plan and waits to see who will take the bait first. Meanwhile, the Roman warrior loudly boasts and challenges everyone to come at him. His mage teammate immediately tells him to calm down because provoking enemies will only make things worse. Seowon can tell that the warrior is brave, but not particularly smart. The archers respond with threats of their own, declaring that nobody from the kingdom will leave the battlefield alive. They appear to be elves, and they even promise Seowon that they will spare him if he chooses to side with them. Listening to both sides argue, Seowon realizes there is clearly a lot happening in this world, and its various factions that he still knows nothing about. While the two teams continue trying to recruit him, Seowon suddenly pulls out the 4th circle stone. He points out to the mage that he surely understands how valuable such an item is. He then turns toward the elves and mentions that the stone could be sold for an enormous fortune as well. Before anyone can react, Seowon places the stone on the ground and presents his proposal. According to him, whichever team wins the fight should claim the stone as the reward. He argues that this solution is much fairer than him personally choosing a side. The moment he finishes speaking, Seowon leaps away and leaves the two teams staring at each other. In reality, the stone is nothing more than bait. He knows perfectly well that nobody has enough time to properly use a 4th circle stone within the next 6 hours. To him, sacrificing the item is a small price to pay if it can keep 4 dangerous players occupied. Besides, whoever survives the fight will likely come after him afterward, meaning he can simply take the stone back later. As he speeds through the desert using Cloud Stride, Seowon cannot help but sigh when he remembers one painful fact. The supply drop's tracking effect is still active, and he has another 5 hours of his location being revealed to survive. A few minutes later, Seowon finally reaches the location he had marked at the center of the map. To his surprise, the area turns out to be a massive canyon. Looking into its depths, he cannot help but worry that a boss monster might emerge from below at any moment. Before he has time to investigate further, the red beacon activates once again. Only then does he realize that another 30 minutes have already passed. Unfortunately, The pursuers he thought he had shaken off soon arrive at the scene. The mage immediately launches a powerful flame spell in his direction. Just before the attack lands, Seowon activates Phantom Step, creating multiple clones that buy him enough time to escape. However, every clone is instantly consumed by the flames. Even Seowon himself gets caught in the blast and cries out in pain. The resulting explosion becomes enormous, destroying everything nearby. After the flames finally settle, the warrior scolds the mage, pointing out that they cannot even loot Seowon now because he has been blasted into the canyon. The mage admits that he probably should have held back a little. He then suggests leaving before the beacon attracts even more players. The warrior refuses because he knows Seowon possessed rare items. In fact, the warrior already owns a powerful rare weapon himself, the chainsword, a blade that can transform and extend like a whip, making it highly effective in long-range combat. Hearing that, the mage becomes annoyed because he still has not acquired any rare items of his own. Determined to recover Seowon's loot, he proposes using levitation magic to search the canyon below. The warrior immediately insists on coming along because neither of them knows how many valuable treasures Seowon might have left behind. Since he has no way to descend safely on his own, they tie a rope around the mage's waist, while the mage uses levitation magic to float downward. As they slowly descend, the mage casually warns the warrior that he might cut the rope if the warrior accidentally falls. The warrior panics and begs him not to do anything so reckless. The mage simply laughs and says they will see what happens. The warrior cannot believe his teammate is joking around when they are supposed to be working together. It turns out that levitation magic is considered extremely dangerous, because most mages cannot cast any other spells while using it, leaving them completely defenseless. Only highly skilled mages can perform other magic while floating. The descent continues until the mage announces that they are nearly at the bottom. The warrior immediately complains that it is easy for him to say because he is not the one dangling over a deadly drop. The mage reminds him that joining the descent was entirely his own decision. Suddenly, the rope goes slack. Terrified, the warrior grabs onto the canyon wall and starts yelling at the mage. However, when he turns around, he discovers something horrifying. His teammate has already been killed. The mage's upper body has been severed from the lower half, making it clear that whoever attacked him had no further use for him. The corpse falls into the water below. Only then does the warrior realize that there is actually a lake at the bottom of the canyon. He cannot believe they spent all that effort being careful when there was water that could have cushioned their fall the entire time. Without thinking much further, he jumps into the lake himself. The warrior surfaces from the water, feeling relieved, but then a terrifying realization strikes him. In all the confusion, he never stopped to ask who had killed his teammate. Before he can react, Seowon suddenly appears. The warrior is stunned because he thought Seowon died in the explosion earlier. Seowon immediately attacks with a bone-punching strike, but the warrior refuses to go down without a fight. Activating his chainsword, he extends the weapon in an attempt to rip Seowon's head off. Instead of retreating, Seowon grabs the weapon and allows the chain blade to wrap around his arm. The sharp edges cut deeply into his flesh, but he refuses to let go. Using his free hand, Seowon grabs the warrior by the head and coldly tells him that he should never have come after him if he was not prepared to die. Then he forces the man's head beneath the water and releases his inner energy. The burst of power shatters the warrior's head underwater, killing him instantly. The moment the team is eliminated, Seowon's kill count updates on the system. Afterward, he drags both loot chests out of the lake. Feeling how heavy they are, he quickly realizes that underwater combat is something he should avoid whenever possible. As he searches through the rewards, he finds a fire orb capable of unleashing a sealed fire spell wherever it is thrown. He also discovers Phoenix Strike, a Circle 4 technique that summons a phoenix which grows larger as it approaches its target. Seeing the high circle requirement, Seowon concludes that the mage was actually much stronger than he initially appeared. He is convinced that fighting the mage at full strength would have been a nightmare. Finally, he happily claims the chainsword for himself. Even though he lacks any swordsmanship skills at the moment, he knows a weapon of that caliber is far too valuable to pass up. Suddenly, Seowon senses someone approaching and immediately disappears before the incoming players can reach him. The group arrives at the location where he had just finished looting, only to discover that nothing valuable remains. While they are still looking around, Seowon silently appears behind them. Using a deadly punch, he instantly takes down one of the players. Thanks to the cloak of hiding, he is able to conceal himself perfectly and catch his enemies completely off guard. Before the team can properly react, Seowon finishes them off and claims their loot. Over the next several hours, his location continues appearing on the map because of the supply drop penalty. During that time, he hunts down numerous players, causing the overall player count to drop to 101. Later, the two elven archers he encountered earlier finally catch up to him. Unfortunately for them, the fight barely lasts any time at all before Seowon eliminates both of them and removes them from the game as well. Once the 6-hour tracking effect finally ends, Seowon takes out the 4th circle stone and the red cloud pill. Knowing that both items require a long period of recovery, he begins searching for the safest possible location to use them. After finding a suitable cave, he prepares himself for the process, fully aware that consuming both items will leave him vulnerable for at least 6 hours. Even so, he does not mind. because he has not properly rested in a long time. He starts with the elixir, and then proceeds to use the other item as well. After 6 exhausting hours pass, Seo-woon finally emerges from the cave. By now, his body has largely adapted to the effects of both items. It is already nighttime, which immediately works in his favor since darkness makes stealth much easier. Curious about the results, he checks his stats and notices that they have increased somewhat. However, the improvement still falls far short of the tremendous boost he once gained from absorbing Nam's energy. Despite that, Seo-woon is satisfied enough to continue hunting. The moment he notices players in the distance, he immediately goes after them. At this point, every enemy player has become nothing more than fuel for his growth. By the following morning, Seo-woon has spent the entire night hunting. When he finally checks the player count, he is shocked to discover that only 42 players remain alive on the 3rd day. Around that time, the system announces that the locations of both boss monsters and buff monsters will now be displayed to everyone. Purple markers indicate boss monsters, while red markers indicate buff monsters. Seeing that a buff monster is located relatively close to him, Seo-woon decides to investigate. Although he understands the risks involved, he is not willing to pass up the opportunity to gain a powerful buff. After traveling for a while, he finally reaches the marked location. The moment he sees the creature, however, he nearly soils himself. The buff monster turns out to be a gigantic snake of terrifying size. Just looking at it, Seo-woon estimates that it would take at least 6 full teams working together to defeat it. His first instinct is to turn around and leave immediately. Unfortunately, before he can escape, the snake opens its eyes and locks onto him. The giant serpent lets out a violent hiss, and Seo-woon becomes so frightened that he freezes where he stands. Unable to move, he watches as the massive creature slowly approaches him. Then, for some reason, the snake suddenly calms down. It quietly returns to its original position and resumes hibernating. Confused, Seo-woon starts wondering why it lost interest. His best guess is that the monster only attacks when someone enters a certain range. Realizing how lucky he was, Seo-woon decides not to test the theory any further. He slowly backs away while trying to convince himself that he is definitely not scared.